Uh-huh. Hello students, good morning to all. I am Dr. Praveen Kumar. So, I hope you have done well in the GS paper 1, and now I have been coming there here for the discussion of GS section. So, as we have seen this in the their geography means or GS means paper 1. So, this paper, as I'll discuss your geography section. So, as I analyze this section, so I found that the paper is analytical applied, and the approach for this attempting the questions or the area of the discussion or framing the questions are absolutely dynamic and applied. So, we have been always uh, approaching to the students or always convincing to the student that they should always study with the case studies, they always should study with the application of the concepts. So, the result is there in the exam. So, our approach has been extremely fruitful and extremely successful in our classroom programs, because the approach of teaching in the classes or the classroom program, it is absolutely applied with the concept development. So, the framing of the question by the experts in the GS paper 1, so it is completely absolutely applied aspect. So, we will discuss the questions here one by one. So, I am faculty in the GS score, Dr. Praveen Kumar. I teach geography, and so I will be taking completely a geography section. So, I will be taking the discussion question number 4 onward, and we will also take this question, will mark it, and will also tell you the framing, how to attempt, and especially for those students, those who have written this examination this 2023, and they can assess how they have approached to the questions and how they have framed the answers. Accordingly, you can presume your marks which you would be getting it, and also this is also the also for the student or the aspirants for will be writing in the 2024. So, they should also prepare their approach of the UPSC examination they have been asking. So, let us start the discussion of the questions and how to attempt, what to discuss and what to avoid there in the answers. So, let us start the first question number 4. This is discuss the consequences of climate change on the food security in the tropical countries. So, we have to keep focus on the discussion that are, this is the question on the tropical countries, right. So, here marker कैसे चलेगा यार, right. So, this is the question is on the tropical countries and the impact of climate change, which is specifically the focus over the food security, right. So, now the beginning of the question should come, the recently the report, it has come from the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, and also their World Food Programs. So, this is World Food Programs. These two organizations have given recently hunger hotspots of the world. Hunger hotspots of the world. So, in this hunger hotspots, they have marked some countries in the world which have been facing the acute problem of availability of the food or approach to the food. So, which has been driven by the climate consequences. Climate consequences. So, in other words, we can also say the climate change. So, because of climate change, the food security to the people have been curtailed or have not been approached. So in that context, we have to give focus in the tropical countries which have been affected under the hunger hotspots, right? So here in the tropical region which have been affected under the food security or the hunger hotspot, so there we include the sub-Saharan countries. So we must mention the region, or if you remember the name of the countries, it is excellent. And if you write the name of the sub-Saharan countries, so that is also acceptable. Then after, we have to go for the Afghanistan, and also that Pakistan. We have also observed this type of the situation in the Myanmar also. So sub-Saharan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Myanmar, and so these countries have the impact of the hunger problem or the food security under the impact of climate change. So now we have to discuss the consequences. What the consequences has been observed which are limiting the availability of the food security to the people. So these consequences we'll see. Number one, the consequences of climate change on the food security will see that reduce in crop yield, reduction in the crop yield or reduce in the crop yield means per capita production of the crop has reduced because of less availability of the water or precipitation, less availability of water and the precipitation. And must remember this, we have to focus over when it is coming on the food security, when it is coming on the climate change, when it is coming to the tropical countries. So we must have the country specific case studies, So means all the factors or all the consequences shall not be observed in all the countries commonly, but some of the factors will be observed common and also some will be diversified. So when we'll have the diversified, we have to mention the name of the country or the case of the country, right? So in such case, we will observe that there the reduce in the crop yield, that we have the case study of India, right? So in India, the rising temperature, the dependency on the in the rain, so there has been the reduce in the crop yield, that particular to rice, wheat, other crops, so there has been decreasing. So that is the crop yield. We'll see this is 2022 heat wave have been responsible for the delay in the monsoon in the northern India. So that delayed in the monsoon has also been responsible for delay in the sowing period of the rice, and also this has extended to the period of the October. So that time period for the maturity of the crop has been reduced, so that the nature of the crop and the per hectare yield has been reduced, particularly in the case of rice in the month of Kharif season. So that we must mention the case study in this. Next is extreme weather event. Number 2, extreme weather event or incidents. So in this extreme weather incidents, we have the many of the case studies of Pakistan. We can also see in 2022 there was massive flood, so which has destroyed the Kharif crop in the Indus basin. There also, because of extreme event in the India, in the Himalayan states, landslides, the excessive rainfall has been destroying the all the mountain crops, so that the reducing. Then also it is also there in the Philippines. We have also observed that the heavy storms in terms of the cyclones, because which have been which has been increased intensity by the climate effect. So the massive crop has been destroyed because of cyclone, because of the other natural event, right? Extreme weather conditions. Number 3 factor we will see, or the consequence we will see, that there is shifting of the agricultural zone or the agricultural belt. There is a shift in agricultural belt or zones. So this shift in the agriculture belt we see there in the case of Brazil, which lies also in the tropical region. So this in the tropical area of the Brazil it has been a very significant impact on the temperature and precipitation. So there is a shift of agriculture zone. Traditional crops which have been becoming more unavailable or the more suitable for the traditional areas, so that the livelihood of the farmers have been disappearing, or livelihood of the farmer have been destructing because of the shifting zones of the agriculture. So next point we discuss on the number 4, right? Certainly we have because of climate change we have water scarcity. So water scarcity has been observed in terms of the reducing sources of irrigation, like in terms of the rainfall, changing amount and pattern of rainfall, right? The depleting groundwater table. So this groundwater table, it is a big case study which has been asked or which has been there in the news in the year 2023 itself, that the groundwater table of Punjab and Haryana has been excessively depleted due to the over exploitation, right? And also at the world level, Egypt is a country in the areas of Egypt in the Nile River region, Nile River basin. Because of climate change, the source of the Nile River is shrinking, so that this water scarcity has been becoming a major problem for growing the crop in that areas, or particularly in the delta region. So it is a massive problem there. Then after the next point we discussed there, that is the loss of biodiversity. So loss of biodiversity in the sense, so we have the poor availability of the organic matter. So the pattern which were earlier, or the pattern which was earlier available, or the organic matter were naturally recharged in the soil, for which were giving the good production of the crop, that have been reduced. So there in the case study of we will include, in the case of Indonesia it has been observed. In the case of Indonesia, so there even though that with the adjacent to the tropical region, so in the Indonesia the biodiversity has been experiencing the big shrink, and also there it is the loss of in the ecosystem, and the quality of the soil has also been reducing due to the non availability of the natural recharge of the soil, fertility of the soil. It is also has been observed that the because of climate change, or that particularly I say the impact on fishing or fisheries, impact of fisheries or the fishing is in the last year, because of marine heat wave, rising temperature of oceans and seas is responsible for the rising the temperature is responsible for the death of the several fishes. So means the aquatic ecosystem has been affected, that the fishes are dying because of excessively rise of temperature under the several condition. So that the fishing is becoming a major this death of the fishes are becoming a major problem, and which is food security for the fishermen in the coastal areas, so that the scope of catching fish has been shrinking under the effect of the marine heat waves, or the heating of ocean water excessively, reducing the scope of fishing in the coastal area. So that livelihood or food securities of the uh, for fishermen in the coastal areas are shrinking. So that way, this is the question should be attempted. So this has been observed in the case of Tamil Nadu, in the coast of India, and also this has been observed in the case of the Bangladesh, Bangladesh, Bangladesh. This case has been observed there, where the fishings are losing their biodiversity, and also the favorable fish zones on the ocean water. So that this problem has been observed in the areas which is reducing the scope of fishing in the coastal region. It is ultimately affected by the climate change or the rise of temperature. So that we can conclude this question. Certainly we have to go for the maybe the solution. We can go for the conclusion, so that the solution and the conclusion is we have to control the climate change inducing activities and ensure food security by other means of source of livelihood without hampering the environment or the nature. So that the proper mitigation plan should be implemented in order to achieve the objectives of the food security and managing the climate change. So that will be our answer, right? So then after, let us discuss to the next question. Yes. So next question is, yes. Yes. Next question is, why is the world today confronted with a crisis of availability of crisis, the one keyword, availability of and access to fresh water resource. Now here, what is available and what is to approach or accessibility. So that is the human is confronted, or it is confronting at the world level. So there, in this context, we have to discuss the first with UNO has declared the right to fresh water, or UNO has declared access to fresh water is the fundamental right, so that the accessibility, or even though accessibility and availability is limited, so that we have to start our answer. So we will underline the accessibility, we will underline the availability, right? So that is the beginning of the answer, right? Then after, here we have observed the question why. So why means we have to give the reasons. So in the reasons or why question is always some factors are responsible behind the accessibility and the availability of the freshwater resource. The foremost reason has been observed. It is population growth, or we can say rapid growth of population. Rapid growth of population, right? So that will be more appropriate term. Because of the rapid growth, the distribution or the approach accessibility is reducing faster, right? So we'll see that the cities, large cities, or the metropolitan cities, mega cities, the population size has been suddenly rising because of the several factors. The indigenous population migration is the problem, or it is creating the problem for the accessibility to the farm or to the fresh water, and also the local governments are facing difficulties to redistribute the freshwater resource among the large size of population. So the population growth which is rapid, so availability is reducing, and also the people have the less accessibility. Second reason is, number 2 is the climate change can never be skipped or can never be spared. So climate change is one of the key factor. So key factor, the climate change is responsible for the changing the pattern. Because of climate change, there is changing pattern of precipitation, so that we have developed our infrastructure on the basis of the old pattern projecting the availability or the change or the occurrence of the precipitation. So what the infrastructure has developed in terms of the storing the water and also then redistributing among the people or the population, so that these storehouses of the water has been shrinking, because the areas which were constructed or the storage facility which were constructed earlier, the rainfall, they are facing the deficit rainfall, and also the areas which were not had in the pattern of the precipitation, they are started receiving the more rainfall. So in that context, so we have been always, or in present context, we have been lacking in the infrastructure and also the failing in the storage facility. So climate change has absolutely changed the prediction, our capability, and also the approach of the planning. Then after, number 3 is pollution. Pollution is also one of the key factor for the availability and access to the fresh water. So we have seen the large cities, there is agriculture, development, urbanization, industrialization has been responsible for releasing or discharging pollutants in the water bodies. so that the freshwater bodies have been contaminated. So these freshwater bodies have been contaminated, so that the availability and accessibility have been shrinked. So in the present context, the pollution of the water bodies due to the chemical discharge, the water bodies like the groundwater level or the groundwater has been contaminated because of the agriculture sector has been excessively using the chemical inputs. So that is why this accessibility is reduced, availability to the fresh water is limited. So the people are limited only to the water which has been supplied by the government agencies, and they have the very least possibilities of availing the water from the natural sources like the underground water, because that always have been or already have been polluted. So I hope this is you are understanding this concept. So that is why there is the discussion, or there is a problem on the availability of the access, the availability of the fresh water and the access to the fresh water, right. The next cause is the number 4 is over extraction, over exploitation that we have already discussed. In the case of groundwater table have already been depleted excessively in Punjab and Haryana region, so that the access to the or availability of the groundwater table has been reduced or shrink to the farmers or the other uses or the common man. So this is also observed in the case same there in the China. There China is also facing the same problem in the Chinese plains. So there is also the depletion of the groundwater table, and also the same case we can mention what we have discussed in the previous question, that is Nile River region is again facing the groundwater depletion, because we have the question on the word. So we must also take the some of the example from the word. Then after number 5, it is inefficient use of water. So inefficient use, we can also say there is a excessive use in a particular sector, and the wastage is also going on. So that the lack of modernization, lack of modernized techniques of the irrigation, and also the infrastructure problem. So there is a wastage of the water has been more than the availability or the use. So that we can take the example there in India. So in India, we have the large water has been flowing there in the river, which has been causing the flood and then reaching to the seas without of any use. So there the developing the canal system or the river channels, so we can have the better use of the surface runoff. So then we can use it for the accessibility and the availability, or we can make available this water to the people, or store water for the the lean period or the crisis period time. So that way this is inefficient use has been going on. And this is also have been observed that in the Indus basin there is also the insufficient use of the water. We have seen there in the Indus basin the water in the Pakistan has not been properly used. In Nepal also the river has been flowing, and then they have been reaching to the India, and they are causing the flood. So that water has not been properly utilized, or there is insufficient or improper use of the water. So we do not have the proper management of the water. So which is most required. Then the next question it is there. This is inefficient or inadequate infrastructure. Inadequate infrastructure, we can include that the most of the water has been flowing and reaching into the oceans, so that in terms of the dams and reservoirs which we have are not adequate and not up to the mark of the storing the water, and also the water which is reaching to the dams and the reservoirs, and also the treatment plants. Treatment plants. So this have not been properly utilized. So that in the recent case of 2023 flood in Delhi, we have observed the many of the treatment plants were closed because the capacity of treating the plant was not sufficient with the treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant. So that the adequate infrastructure are not available, or we have not developed for predicting the need and the demand in the future. So that we are lacking in the infrastructure availability over the country. Thereafter, we also have the issues with the neighboring countries, that we have the number 7 point. This is transboundary conflicts. Transboundary conflict in the sense, transboundary conflict means there is a disputes between the countries or among the countries. Like for example, there is an issue of the sharing of the water between India and China, and also sharing of the water between the India, Nepal, India, Pakistan. So that, and not only India, there in the different countries of the world, the most important, the significant river in the world is Nile, which has been flowing in the different countries, and these countries are storing and blocking the flow of river water or the Nile river, so that this when it is reaching to the lower areas, there the availability of the water has been lesser, so the people have the lesser accessibility. So the Nile river or the Egypt has been always facing crisis of availability because the disputes with the countries over the upper course of the river Nile. So that we have this is a very significant case study there in this question, we must mention it, right. Then after, there is a number 8 I will discuss, that is the poor management and governance. Poor management and governance. Poor management means, even though we have the capability to store water or avail the water, but our management system is not proper, so that some areas are accessibly, some areas have the access water, some areas have the some areas are facing the very much high deficit water conditions in the world. So like some part of the Africa has excess water, and some part of the Africa is absolutely dry. So because of these conditions, the poor management is always observed there, due to the governance is also poor. So that we can go for the conclusion of this answer. So that we have to make for the conclusion, or we can also go for suggestions or the way forward. So means we have to avail the fresh water and access to the fresh water to the common man or the people of the country. So we have to go for the proper management of water, developing proper infrastructure, and also the repairing or making efficient treatment plants, and also we can go for the suggestion that the making policies for next 100 years, not for the short time, long term policies, and also the making plans for focusing climate change impacts. So we can go for this these suggestions or the conclusions, right? So let us go to the next topic, next question. Okay, so that next question is how are the fjord coast formed? So this is the question which we have always been discussing there in our class sessions. How are the fjord formed, and why do they how the fjord formed, why do they constitute some of the most picturesque areas of the world? So this is the fjord, right? This fjord, or it is also spelled like this, fjord, fjord coast. So these are the fjord coast, and the fjord are formed so that we the question of this it is asking this how it is asking on the mechanism of formation of fjord and how they constitute some of the most picturesque areas of the world. So means it is asking the significance. So we have to focus over these two part of the question. How the fjords are formed. Number two, the significance of the fjord. So let us discuss this. Fjord coast. Fjord has been formed due to the certain condition. The condition which are required, or we can go for the introduction, that the fjord are the narrow inlets or zones of coastal region in temperate to polar region, or zones. So that is the wide extension of this fjord has been formed, right? So the fjords are formed due to number one factor is the geological changes, and number two is climate change impact. So these are the two factors responsible for the fjord. How this is formed? Then the how formation is, then we will be write the mechanism of formation. So this mechanism of formation is based on the number one, that is called glacial avalanche. So glacial avalanche is observed when the mass of ice, it slips on the mountains and it reaches over the coastal areas. So the moving of the glacier has been responsible for the bedrock erosion. So it makes the formation of the valley. So that weight has been responsible for erosion of the valley or the coastal areas, is responsible for the formation of the fjord, right? Number two is U-shaped valleys. U-shaped valleys are formed along the coastal areas. So these U-shaped valleys are formed because of the glacial erosion, means the glacier has been moving from the coastal region, and when they reach over the coastal area, so they erode the valley vertically, and this valley has been formed deeper. So when the deglaciation occurs, this valley has been submerging under the sea level, and these are the V-shaped valleys, right? The third region is, number three is deepening and widening. So because of V-shaped valleys, the already pre-formed valley by the fluvial erosion. So for example, earlier this area, it was there under the fluvial erosion, rivers were flowing, and because of glaciation, the glaciers have been moving on, and this V-shaped valley has been further eroded and formed as a U-shaped valley. So, this valley has been deepened and widened in the form of the U shape. So, this is responsible for the widening of the valley, preformed or over the V-shaped valley by the fluvial erosion. Then after it is called the glacial retreat. Number 4 reason is the glacial retreat. So, glacial retreat is for example, this whole area is, this is under the glacier, or this is a glacier mass, it is mountain, and when the glacier retreats, so there is a movement of the glacier down and slipping off, so there is a erosion, it starts. Or the valley which was under the glacier was formed by the glacial erosion, it exposed as the part of the valley. So, it also appears as a U-shaped valley, right. Then after there is then why or how there are some picturesque areas of the world. So, second part of the question we come on. Second part of question, and also you must also one more thing, in the introduction when you will write what is fjord coast, you can make the diagrams, or in the last you can give the, in this area picturesque fjord also you can make the diagram. So, why the fjord coast has been formed, or the picturesque of the word? Number 1, it is this scenic beauty or grandeur. Scenic grandeur. So, scenic grandeur is the juxtaposition of the towering cliffs, mountain steep slopes, deep valleys. So, there is a very famous and the geological marvels and the climatic the impressions are visible or exposed, right. Number 2, it is calm water. Calm water means if we discuss, there is fjord coast. Fjord coast are the narrow inlets of the water. So, this is fjord coast. So, this water has been more reaching inside the coastal areas, so that the disturbance or the external disturbance of the ocean water is lesser. So, this water movement is less. So, this calm condition prevails. It is rich biodiversity. We must mention it, rich biodiversity. Rich biodiversity because it is a shallow zones. It is a shallow zone or photic zone or the ocean water or the sea water, so that it is a extremely favorable the fishing grounds. So, we will find this plenty of fishes, different variety of the fishes in these areas, and we will find there the valley glacier or glacial waterfall or the valley glacier we find there near the coast, right. So, it gives the immense beautiful impression of the nature or the geological formation, and then there is a clear reflection of, number 5, it is a clear reflection of or impression of glaciation and deglaciation. So, means we will find there in the fjord coast, we will find some of the marks of the movement of the glaciers. So, that will be the studies of the geology also, and very beautiful appearance of the rock it has been representing. Deglaciation mark it has also been given there. This was extension of the glaciers, then which has melted, and that gives the several of the deposited material which have been the complete impression of the deglaciation and erosion. So, we can also mention there the some of the examples. They are the coast of Greenlands. We can go for the examples also here. The coast of Greenland, Norway, then after Iceland, Britain, then after Alaska, Russia, Chile, Argentina, New Zealand are the examples, are the coastlines, are the examples of fjord coast. So, we can make this the mark here in this, we can make the diagram of this, this is Greenland like this, Iceland, Norway, this is coastline, and also here this is the coastline of Britain, it is also the coast here. So, this way this is, we can go for the mark this in the box right here Greenland, and Canada is also an example, Canada. So, here you can also give the some islands of the Canada, right. This is Britain, Norway, Iceland, right, Canada. So, you can give this one map and write here Atlantic Ocean. Atlantic Ocean. Give your figure number according to the question number. What is that question number? It is question number 6. Yes, question number 6. So, here they go give here the figure number 6.1, 6.1 fjord coast, fjord coast examples, right. So, that is, you give the diagram and the map, and also write here the figure 6.1 in bracket, means this this diagram belongs to this paragraph. So, this complete impression will be there, right. So, that in the conclusion, because it is all the explanatory mechanism we have discussed. So, in conclusion we can go for the fjord coast is the climate change may be responsible for further formation of fjord coast in future in polar and subpolar areas, polar and subpolar areas, right. So, this will be a one line or the very simple conclusion, right. Then after we will discuss that yes, next question is this, next question, let us discuss this next question. Yes, this is an important part of the discussion, right. So, this is why the southwest monsoon called Purvaiya, the topic here, the Purvaiya easterlies in the Bhojpur region. So, you must remember the Bhojpur region is belongs to Bihar, it is Bihar. How has directional seasonal wind system influenced the cultural ethos of the region? So, means the question is the Purvaiya, that is southwest monsoon, that is concerned with the Bihar, and what is the cultural association with the monsoon. So, that we will say the southwest monsoon enters in Bihar from West Bengal in the east, so it takes it takes southeast to west direction, thus called easterly or Purvaya monsoon or winds, right. So this is the end of our first explanation or the first part of the question, right. So here you will make a diagram, a simple diagram you can make. This is you can make this, no need to go for the much of the detail in that, right. So draw this simple diagram. So this is monsoon wind entering here and this enters to the west. So show this also, this is Bhojpur region in Bihar, and right here easterlies, and right here southwest monsoon, right, southwest monsoon, right. So this is give here figure number, the question number is here 7, so then we will give the figure number 7.1 and give the title to the figure Purvaya and the Bhojpur region, right. So this is means this diagram has been belonging to this paragraph. So this will be your introduction. So examiner will be happy when you represent this, the explanation. So this diagram itself is explanatory. So this examiner will be happy with seeing this diagram. So you have explained everything or you have shown this everything there in the what you have written in the text. So that will be the most basic and the fundamental approach of writing the answer in the beginning. So if you give the diagram in the introduction, that will be the more impressive, right. Then after second part of the question, how has directional seasonal wind system influenced the cultural ethos of the region? So cultural ethos, we can say cultural ethos of the region means it has Purvaya determines the cultural ethos by number 1 agricultural calendar means the Purvaya is in the Bhojpur region, it is the arrival of monsoon, and also it is deciding or it is exhibiting the sowing period of Kharif crops, right. So that the monsoon has been giving the open to the sowing of the Kharif crop. That is first the monsoon region, it has been decided. Number 2, it has been connected with number 2 festivals. So with the arrival of the monsoon in the Purvaya, there has been celebrated the Tej. So Tej has been very massively celebrated in a Bihar region or the Bhojpur region, right. So this marks the beginning of the agriculture year, where they will have the happy news, happy feeling by the sowing their crops. So this way the farmers, they celebrate or they have been celebrating with the certain rituals, traditional songs, the traditional dances have been performed on this occasion. Then there is influence on the tradition and the festivals. So these festivals which has been marked, this is Chhat Puja. So you can mark this, Chhat Puja has been celebrated. There are some folk dances also there. Folk dances have been performed particularly there on the Chhat Puja. So then also this region also have the influence on the literatures. So this Purvaya has the influence on the literatures. So we will find this some poems, kavitas, which has been written by about the fascination of the Purvaya winds, monsoon, and also this is also the we have also been finding there some in the novels, writings, and also the some nataks. It all mentioned in the literatures of Bhojpur region. So this is the cultural impact is there, and also this whole region collectively has been making this occasion of the arrival of the monsoon a very much traditional and the very much fascinating to the people. So that way you can conclude this answer. So we will have the conclusion. The natural phenomena always connected to local lifestyle, connected to local or the regional lifestyle and social integration and social integration and the social bonding or bonding, we can say social bonding in society, right, in the society. Thus is same in Bhojpur region at time of Purvaya, right, Purvaya. So that will be our conclusion, right. Then after next, this is next question. Right. So here next question is question number 14. Question number 14 is comment on the resource potential of the long coastline of the India. Resource potential coastline of India and highlight the status of the natural hazard preparedness of the region. So we have to give the advantages, potential. So I would say this is the repeated question in the 2007. This is the question was what are the significances of the coast of India? So this is the repeated question. The first part of the question, it is repeated of the UPSC. First we have number 1, marine resources. So marine resources, you can also say this is we have the biotic and abiotic resources. Biotic resources, abiotic resources. Biotic resources we have fisheries, and abiotic resources we have petroleum or the crude oil, energy, wind energy, tidal energy. So bracket and write, you can write the tidal and wind energy. So there in the coastal areas you can give the some examples. Here we have the petroleum, we have Mumbai High, and then the wind energy we have the largest wind energy plant there in the Kanyakumari. So in the coastal region. Biotic resource in the fisheries we can go for the Maharashtra is largest producer of marine fishes at west coast, right. So this is a marine resource, biotic, abiotic. Then we will go for the tourism. Certainly it is tourism is there, so you can give the example several. They are like Goa, Kochi, Kanyakumari, and also there are the cultural significance also. So the cultural you can give the Puri. You can give this Puri is an important part. Then we have the ports. Economic, you can give this port for trade, ports for trade, the particularly the western coast, and also we have the some you can give the polymetallic nodules or the other minerals have been extracted from there, right. Then after we will go for the second part of the discussion, but connecting to the first part, but coastline have the certain influence of the natural hazards. So, which require natural hazards like cyclone in both the coast and tsunami, sea level rise, right. So, this we will have the these natural hazards are there. So, we require the focused preparedness. So, what the this focused preparedness for, like we will go for the tsunami. So, this in terms of the tsunami, since 2004 after the Indonesian tsunami or the tsunami in the Indonesia. So, India has become more cautious about the coastal management by developing early warning system for tsunami, right. So, there has been the more of the installation of the devices at sea floor in both the seas, Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, in order to observe the some vibration and the earthquake measuring devices on this floor. Then also some of the floating devices which has been recording the rise in the sea level. So, that rise in the sea level has been observed in the different locations, right. Then after mobile ships. So, they have the weather stations also. So, it has been continuously monitoring the atmospheric conditions of the oceans and all, directing to the ground stations for the informing of any change it happens there in the ocean sea surface, temperature or the height. Then after there is a number 2 is number 2 is their coastal mangrove conservation. Number 2, there is mangrove conservation, or this mangrove conservation particularly for the protection from tsunami and cyclones or any other storms, or at the time of sea surge. Then also we have this management or the preparedness for cyclones. So, we have the we have this coastal meteorological stations and mobile weather stations. So, which have been giving the information of every minute and every hour. So, that we have the large preparation. Satellite also we have developed. Number 4, it is the coastal management system, coastal management zones. It has been implemented there in the coastal areas, so that the more focus has been given on the control on marine pollution, so that natural hazard can be protected as like the degrading the natural ecosystem, right. So, that way we have discussed we have the several preparedness plan for this, or the hazard specific and the integrated plan we have made for the coastal areas, right. Then after we will move to the next question. So, next question is, yes, identify and discuss identify and discuss the factors responsible for diversity of natural vegetation in India, assess the significance of wildlife sanctuaries in the rainforest regions of India, right? Significance of wildlife sanctuaries in the rainforest regions of India. First, we have to go for the identification and discuss, right? So this is same, right? Responsible for the diversity in the natural vegetation. So means it is actually the factors controlling the natural vegetation. So we have been always discussing our topic in the geography or in the particularly the vegetation topic. So what factors are responsible for growth of plant and trees, right? So this is the natural physical condition of the India or salient features of physical geography. It is there, that in the Indian geography, that is the primary, one of the primary factor of the discussion in our complete classwork or our classroom program. So that I just want to say that we have been going appropriately with the approach there in the classes, right? Then after, so factors controlling the natural vegetation. So where there is a geographical conditions, we can say, or the geographical extent. So that in the geographical extent we have seen there is some tropical, subtropical. So the climate has been divided into it. The south of Tropic of Cancer, it is tropical vegetation, it is called, and in the Gangetic Plain it is called the subtropical climate, right? So that the geographical extent has been responsible for the growth of the plant. Then after that is climate is another factor. So climate, it includes the temperature and vegetation, and also we say this is, there is a climate is index of vegetation. So climatic determinants controls the type of vegetation, right? So this the climate, we have been dividing the climate on the basis of amount of precipitation. So there we can go for the discussion like the more than 250 centimeter rainfall, there is a evergreen forest. 100 to 200 centimeter rainfall, there are deciduous, this moist deciduous forest, and then after 75 to 100 centimeter rainfall, there is a dry deciduous. So if you make this table only, it will be acceptable. And then 50 to 75 centimeter rainfall, it is there xerophyte, and less than 50 centimeter, there is no vegetation, right? So if you draw this table in this point, that is also will be acceptable in the shortest discussion. Then after we have the altitude. Third factor for the is altitude. So we will go for the alpine forest. So for that you can go for the making this diagram 1500 meter. This is 2200 meter, or some books you will find 2000 meter. This is 3500 meter, right? So this is mixed forest, mixed of deciduous, dry and moist deciduous. Here we will find the coniferous forest of Deodar. Here is coniferous forest along with the grasslands. So marg also you will find. So this above, this is also the grasslands, and here is a ice caps. This is ice caps. So this is altitude is one of the factors you can represent with a diagram itself. Then after wind patterns. So wind pattern is the monsoon wind is also responsible for bringing the vegetation, bringing the rainfall. So that is favorable condition for the growth of the plants. Then we call it as a human activities. Human activities is one of the key factor for the controlling the vegetation. like degradation of forest, deforestation is a key factor for the controlling the natural vegetation. So, the higher rate of the deforestation is responsible for reducing the size of the vegetation cover, right. Then the second part of the question is assess the significance of wildlife sanctuaries in the rainforest regions of the world. So, we will go for the rainforest areas are extending in the areas of more than rainfall 250 centimeter, that extends in the Western Ghats, northeastern states, Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So, these are the areas where the rainforest have been grown. Then after we will go for the significance, their significance of the wildlife sanctuaries, in the rainforest areas. So, the significances we will write simply the title of this significances. So, in these significances we will write this is providing the natural habitat to the wildlife, right, and also some of the species specific. For example, there in the Kerala or the Western Ghat, we have the several of the specific species in the like the Periyar wildlife sanctuaries, and also there the Nilgiri Tar. There is a lion tailed. This is lion tailed there in a Nilgiri National Park. So that way the species specific or the endangered species, endemic species. So we are keeping specifically there in the wildlife sanctuaries for the protection, right. Then after this is protection of wildlife. Number 3 we will go for that. Number 3 factor is a biodiversity conservation. In the this wildlife areas. So then after the another significant point is there. Number 4, this wildlife areas are the research and education. Studies for tracing out or finding out the natural habitat for the wild animals. Number 5 is ecotourism, promotion of ecotourism, the best impact, and also the climate regulation. In the sense the impact of the wildlife sanctuaries have been demarcated in order to reduce the impact of the climate or adverse impact of the climate, right. So then after this is yes. So next question we will move on. Yes. Why did the human development fails to keep pace with economic development in India? Human development has been failed to keep the pace with the economic development, means there has been the gap of the human development as well as the economic development is going on. So we will find out the why. So means we will see the factors responsible for this. Factors, number 1 factor is there is a low human development impact because of this high economic development. Number 1 factor is income inequality. There is income inequality, right. So income has been not equally distributed. There is also the educational inequality, right. So education has not been provided to the people equally. Some sections have been left behind in order to get the education. Then after number 3 is healthcare facilities. healthcare facilities have not been, or accessibilities have not been given to all the people do not have the good health care, so that the people are left behind. Then after, there is a gender inequality. This is the most drawback of the society. There, the discrimination, social discrimination has been prevailing in the society. So there, the India has been growing with the economic pace, so that once there, India has been growing in terms of GDP, India has been growing in terms of HDI index, where India has a report at the 135 ranks out of the 189 countries, but still that we have the lacking in the human development, right? And also the poverty eradication programs have been all there in a process, but still this program has not been properly implemented. And then we will go for the conclusion in the context of their conclusion shall be there, the removing all the gaps between this or within the society in order to provide the better facilities or the equal facilities to all the sections of society, and also the focus on the bridging the gap of gender inequality. So that shall be our answer. Then after, next question is from being net food importer in the 1960s, that has India has emerged as the net food exporter to the world. Provide reasons. So there is a two phases. It is 1960 to present, right? So we'll go accordingly. That the 1960s was the phase of the food importer, because of number one, the infant country. India was an infant country of just only the 1960. It is 13 years of independence. Infant country, 13 years of independence. So we had not much developed the infrastructure, and we had not progressed in the agriculture, so that we were depending on the system which was already existed or planned by the Britishers. So we have been facing the lacking of the growth in the food grain crop. Thereafter, number two, it is population pressure. So population, we have the huge population of India, and also the indigenous population, and also the migrated population from the neighboring countries. So we have been facing the huge population pressure of the country in order to provide them the food. Then after, there number three, traditional methods of farming or production, so that the per hectare yield was less, which was not sufficient to feed the population size. Then we have the lack of infrastructure. So this lack of infrastructure also was not giving the adequate supply or the input to the agriculture sector. So this production was less or limited. Then the vulnerability was there. So that we were affected by several famines, flood, drought. So that has been the reason for the failure of crops. But over the period of time, so after 1960, we had the exporter stage of the country. So first, here is green revolution is a very key factor for making India self-reliance in the food grain crops. So there we adopted in the 1966-67, the adoption of the green revolution has made India a most developed or the self-dependent country in the world and the food grain. Then after the investment in irrigation, or we can also see, we can also write the more of the development of artificial sources of irrigation. Like for example, canals we have constructed a lot. A large channel of the canal has been constructed in the rainfall deficit areas. Then we have dig the tube wells. We have developed the pond irrigation in the different part of the countries. So that has made the India self-dependent, or over dependency of the nature has been reduced, right? Then after improved agriculture practice, so that their adoption of the modern agriculture practice, like also there has been modernization of agriculture in terms of the use of technology like the machineries or mechanization of agriculture by using the machineries has given the more production and less labor. So that has been the growth in the agriculture sector in the country. Then after there has been the favorable government policies. So government has introduced several policies in terms of giving the subsidies to the farmers in order to give the loans, or we can call them the easy loans, credit facilities, so that farmer has been going for the cropping. So that has given the advantage or giving the scope to the farmers to grow or the more crops. So that is India has become the self-dependent in the country. So we will mention here the self-dependence. This is there from the current affair news and the agriculture sector. So in conclusion, we will write here that there during the Gulf War period. Now conclusion, during the Ukraine-Russia war, when shortage of, or when world faced shortage of wheat in the world, due to no supply of wheat from Ukraine, because Ukraine is the fourth largest producer of wheat in the world. No supply of wheat from Ukraine. So India extended helping hand to different countries in the world to provide wheat at low price. For among those, that the Egypt is a very first country where India promised to export or to supply 2 lakh tons of wheat to the Egypt and also to the Saudi Arabia. So these two countries were the leading countries, those who were ready to import the Indian wheat before the lack of supply from Ukraine, right? So that is the whole scenario, the reasons and the conclusions. We have ended with the current scenario of this export of the India to the other countries of the world. So I wish you have attempted, especially for those who have written the examination 2023, I wish you all the best, and you must have attempted the question in this pattern. And thank you so much, and the session will continue with the another sir, and all the best to the next coming up examination, the people those who will be taking up exam in the next year. I wish you all the best. I am your faculty Dr. Praveen Kumar. We will meet in some other discussion. Thank you.
Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. I hope all of you have gone through the paper. Myself, Shivalal Gupta, and I'm the author of the book for the world history for the Pearson publication. Now, let's before I'm going to discuss the history question, let's discuss certain basic premises. As I can say, there are certain basic premises which UPSC always follow. Like for example, as we have discussed in our trend analysis video, the importance of history is approximately in GS1 paper lies between the 75 to 90 marks. This is what we have already maintained in our trend analysis video. And even this year, the main trend continues, and you will find out in GS1 paper, it is of 90 marks. And as all of you know, history is one of the most comprehensive subject. It comprises the ancient, medieval, art and culture. Then we have modern India and obviously world history along with the post-independence. So what is the breakup for this year? The question from the modern India is of 25 marks. 25 marks. And then when we talk about ancient and the medieval, surprisingly, including the art and culture, we can say 40 marks. So that's a huge weightage. And then we can say world history, 10 mark from industrial revolution, railway. And then finally, we have post-independence. If we consider the agriculture question, so that is also the 15 marks. So by by going through this, you will find out this year the question was actually of 90 marks. So again, the same trend is maintained even by the UPSC in 2023. Now, dear aspirant, as we have maintained, what is the marks? How to score the marks? Again, there are two things. Let me discuss basic first, and then obviously I will come back to the question. So, what is the mark in UPSC? How you achieve the mark? We have content. We have consistently maintained that content, right? Your content is very important. Nowadays, content is very easily available. So, quality of content. What kind of content you write in your answers, that is also very important. And after the content, the crafting, how you write the answers. And here, your thinking part plays very, very important role. And this is what we are maintaining in our, we are arguing in our classes. This is what we have discussed in our test series, and this is what we have maintained over the years under the leadership of our guided sir Manoj Jha sir. So this is what we always maintain, that your thinking as well as the quality of content, they are very, very important to score the marks. And even this year, this is also true. All good. So obviously, I will discuss all this question on the same parameter, and we will consider thinking. We will have a thinking, and obviously, I just want you guys, if you can, I will discuss the question first, but you can also write your thinking in the chat box. If you have any thinking line, you can also write in the chat box. Obviously, I will go through it and I will give my opinion. So I hope now idea is clear. Let's discuss this, from the question number 1. Okay. So when we talk about question number 1, what is the role of geographical factor? This is the first important, right? Role of geographical factor in the development of ancient India. So this is what we have to understand. The question is about the ancient India. So make sure you do not write. Anything about your thinking need to be revolved around the ancient India. So you should write the example from the ancient India more than that of the medieval and the modern India. That is the first thing you have to think in mind, right? Now, what should be my thinking line, right? Obviously, you have to think, it's very difficult for the non-history background history student whose optional is not history to write about this question, right? So now you will talk about just what should be your thinking line. Your thinking line need to be to think about the various geographical area. Like we have Himalayas here, right? So how Himalayas influence Indian history, right? And then we have Thar desert here, right? Thar desert. Then you have Yamuna and Ganga river, right? These are the Gangetic area. So how it influence our history. Then we have Deccan, or we can say we have Vindhyas, right? And Satpura, right? So how this mountain influence our history. Then you can talk about India is surrounded, we have a coastline here, right? So we have, various advantage as well as the disadvantage, right? So understand, the question is talking about how all these geographical factor influence the history of India. If you have that thinking line, then it's very easy to write about the point. And this is the way we are going to proceed. I hope now you got the idea, right? So now understand, as we have said, answer writing is all about your introductions, then body part, and then conclusion. So what should be your intro? Intro, either you can borrow from the content, specific quality content, or you can use your creativity. Crafting. You can use both this technique. For example, in content part, if you have certain content, like you can argue Didi Kosambi, if you have quality content, then you can write like this. Didi Kosambi was the first historian who integrated the geography to understand the historical consequences. So you can write that, or you can also write, begin from this, like India is a very, India have a distinct geographical, like plain, Thar desert, Yamuna, Gangetic river, Vindhyas, Satpura, and that provided the distinct, consequences to the India. So in this way, you can write your intro. Either you can go for this content, like quality content like Didi Kosambi, or you can also use, in that case, if not absent, if not known to you, then obviously you can adopt this creativeness. I hope now this idea is clear. So obviously if you adopt this creativeness, then it's very easy for you to write the answers, right? Now I will take one by one all those differences, and I will argue how can you think and write. Okay, because again, this is not a classical question, at least for the non-history background question, right? Now, when we talk about Vindhyas, let's talk about Vindhyas and Satpuras, right? So understand, Vindhyas and Satpuras, when we talk about Vindhyas and the Satpuras, they were considered to be natural barrier between the north and the south. The mountains of the Vindhyas and the Satpuras, they are considered to be the natural barriers between the north and south, and that is why you will find out we have a different history of north and the south. Very few kings, they were able to integrate both north and the south. And this is the way you have to understand the first important impact. Why we have generally, different history of north and the south. It is all because of the Vindhyas and the Satpuras. They are considered to be natural barrier, and that is why we have a different, right? And except the Britishers, very few kings were able to dominate over the north and the south. So in this way, you can argue the first point. Second point, now understand, since this was a natural barrier, Vindhyas and the Satpuras, you will find out, very few attack also happen in this part of the India. So you will find out mostly the, prior to the arrival of the European, we are talking about ancient India. So very few attack happen in the, south of the Vindhyas and the Satpura mountain, because it was a very, it was a natural barrier. So in this way, you will argue the first part. I hope now you got the ideas. Vindhyas, Satpuras, they were the natural barrier, and that is why we have a different history of north and the south. I hope now that thinking line is clear to all of you, right? And that is why we also have very less invasion, foreign invasion in south, right? So that is the way you will write the first. Second, let's talk about influence of Thar desert, right? Let's talk about influence of Thar desert. Now understand this point. See, Thar desert basically divide the, this part into the two. This is going to be economically backward area, and this is going to be economically rich area due to the presence of Yamuna and the Ganga. And now understand, there will be certain dynasty, there will be certain political establishment in this part. Now all this kingdom, they will have very limited resources, because this is not economically very, rich area, economically not a very rich area. So the king will have very limited resources, and the limited resources will lead to the limited army. And that is why limited army, this invited the invasion from the outside, because they were not very powerful. And that is the reason you will find out India witnessed the large number of the invasion, right from the Alexander to the Mahmud Ghazni to the Muhammad Ghori. So you can highlight those, foreign invasion because of the presence of the Thar desert, which divided the northwest into the two parts, economically, backward area and then economically rich area. So in this way, you will argue the second part. I hope now you got the idea, right? Fine. Then you can talk about, next, let's talk about Yamuna and Ganga, right? Now, when we talk about presence of river, okay, how rivers influence the history, right? So understand, when we talk about river, initial, in the absence of the, irrigation method, not advanced irrigation method, you will find out the civilization was very much dependent on the supply of water from the river. And that is why you will find out first Indian civilization, first urban civilization, right? That is the Harappan civilization was created on the Indus River, right? And the second, second urbanization, we can say second urban civilization was on the Gangetic area. Gangetic area. So this is the way you can also highlight the importance role played by the river. Okay. So first urban civilization you will talk about, and then you will talk about the Gangetic area provided the second urbanization. In fact, you will also argue, particularly in the ancient India, the king who controlled the Patliputra, which was situated on the Gangetic river, the king also controlled the, ancient India, particularly the northern India. Okay. So in this way, you will argue, since Patliputra was situated on the Gangetic river, it was resources wise very rich area, geographically very protected area, and thus you will find out if you will find out the dynasty which will control the Patliputra, they will control the, they will control the at least the northern part of the India. So I hope now you got the idea, right? And moreover, you can also talk about the art and culture. Art and culture. Now, development of art and culture. How culture is associated with the geography. Now, understand this part. Obviously, India was actually particularly the northern part from the Indus to Ganga and the Yamuna. This belt was economically very rich, prosperous area, and because of this prosperity, particularly the Mauryas and Gupta. Okay, they control this Gangetic line, and that is why they had a huge resources, and later on they utilized those resources for the development of literature. For example, you see, book like Arthashastra and so on. In the Gupta, we have whole lot of the literary development. You can write that example here, right? So understand, presence of this, all these rivers led to the economic prosperity. Economic prosperity led to the development of art and culture in the form of the literature, and no wonder you will find out Gupta age is called as a golden age for their contribution in the art and culture, and the base was provided by the presence of the Gangetic river. So I hope now you got the idea. So this is what we have maintained throughout, your thinking line. If you have a good thinking line, then it's easy to, again, it's very difficult to prepare, to write such a question without the thinking line, right? So on the basis of, if you have geographical, if you get the idea of geography, then you can produce certain points, and obviously you can write it down. I hope now the intro part is clear. Either you can begin with the Didi Kosambi, or you can write about the, the different location led to the different consequences. That is the idea you can write in the first part, and then in the body part you can write various geographical, location and how they led to the development of what we call as the history of ancient India. So I hope now the first question is clear to all of you, right? Fine. Now, again, second question, very expected one, right? Difference between Mahatma Gandhi and the Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore was in the news, and that is the reason this question, was. And Mahatma Gandhi, all of he is a benchmark, right? So on the basis of that, this idea is, and obviously Mahatma Gandhi and the Rabindranath Tagore, they are the important, we can say Mahatma Gandhi and the Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, they are the important personalities of the modern India. So anyway, right? So what should be your thinking line here, right? Again, the UPSC had already constructed the thinking line by giving the dimensions. You have to write about the the opinion between the Mahatma Gandhi and the Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore with respect to the education, first point, and then nationalism, right? So again, what creativity, what thinking line you can add here, right? What creativity you can add? Okay, you can also write in the chat box. What creativity, what thinking? Like now, understand, when we talk about Shruti Sharma, right? All India rank 1. All India rank 1. So if you look at, obviously she got All India rank because of her content as well as the creativity. So what is the creativity you can use here? In the intro part, what you can do? You can use certain quotes, okay, and obviously that quotes will give you the advantage in comparison to the others, which was done by this Shruti. If you go through this Shruti's answers, you will find out she also used the various quote. For example, in this case, you can write the quotes of the Miraben, all of who came from the outside. She was popularly called as a Miraben. And what she argued, she said, I now realize how Santi Niketan and Sabarmati. Santi Niketan means Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. Sabarmati means Mahatma Gandhi. Again, I repeat, I now realize how Shanti Niketan and Sabarmati are two fair daughters of the same great motherland, but both had their different beauty of their own, different look. They do look differently, but they have the same likeness, fundamental likeness of the same parents. So very beautifully Miraben here highlighted Mahatma Gandhi, like, right? Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore, they are two different daughters. We can say Sabarmati and, Shanti Niketan, the word used by the Miraben. So they are the two different daughters of the same parents, both have their own beauty, but their fundamentals are the same. This is the beautiful descriptions of the Miraben that differ, that actually, highlight the commonality as well as the differences between the, Rabindranath Tagore and the Mahatma Gandhi. If you can begin with such a line, then certainly you will have advantage as compared to the others. So I hope now you got the idea. So, what creativity? Again, creativity, you should have, again, if you have quality content like this, obviously you can perform better than the others, right? Okay, fine. Now, okay, what should be our intro? You can begin with the Miraben quotes, as I said. Then what is the intro? In the intro, you will talk about both Mahatma Gandhi, and Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore talked about the rural constructions, revival of the village. Both talked about the social reforms. Both talked about the Hindu-Muslim unity, but their approach was different to the nationalism and the education. So in this way, you will begin your argue. You will highlight certain similarities, like both, as we have discussed, both stood for the social reforms, village empowerment, Hindu-Muslim unity, but they had a different approach with respect to the education and the nationalism. So in this way, you will begin your intro after the quotes of the Miraben, right? Then what is the body part? In the body parts, first we will talk about their approach to the education. And here we will talk about the approach adopted by the Mahatma Gandhi first. Now, when we talk about Mahatma Gandhi, what is the important criteria of education? What kind of education need to be there for Mahatma Gandhi? According to Mahatma Gandhi, the education need to be the basic education, right? According to Mahatma Gandhi, education need to be basic one. Okay. It need to be simple, and it need to make the person self-reliant. And thus Mahatma Gandhi focused on the occasional education, education that gives you the livelihood. Okay. And this is what you will write down here. For example, Mahatma Gandhi gave the, framework to his education idea by establishing the Tolstoy form in South Africa, right? So Mahatma Gandhi, you will find out, he established the Tolstoy form in South Africa with the purpose of imparting the education to the certain children. And the idea of the education was to make people self-reliant. Okay, to make people self-reliant first, that is the important criteria. And then again, it's also need to be based on the moral education, right? So in this way, you will, see the education of Mahatma Gandhi, which he basically experimented in the form of the Tolstoy form in South Africa. And then you will talk about Mahatma Gandhi, we can talk about, for example, the Nai Talim. This is a very important, words that need to be in your answers. Nai Talim means new education system. And again, the bottom line of this Nai Talim was learning learning through productive work. Learning through productive work. Okay. So this basically defines the approach of Mahatma Gandhi with respect to the education. Learning through productivity. You should learn at the same time. You should, basically, you become self-reliant and you should contribute towards the community through your education. So you can, basically learn the occasional activity which Mahatma Gandhi tried to impart via the Nai Talim. So this is the approach of the Mahatma Gandhi. I hope now approach of Mahatma Gandhi with respect to the education is clear. On the other hand, when we talk about Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, so Gurudev has cosmopolitan approach. The approach of Rabindranath Tagore was, different from Mahatma Gandhi, right? So when we talk about Rabindranath Tagore, obviously Gurudev had a different approach. His approach was cosmopolitan, and you will find out the purpose of education for Gurudev was to, create the creativity. His focus was, what is the purpose of education? Creativity, right? And then to develop the, intellectual development of, individuals, and then along with giving the cultural aspect to the education. So according to the Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, what should be the approach of the education? Cosmopolitan approach, creativity, intellectual, and the cultural. So if you look at, again, the idea is different. Mahatma Gandhi is self-reliant, creativity, that is the idea. And that is why you will find out with this basic approach, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, he founded the Vishwa Bharati Vidyapit at Santi Niketan, where the idea was to give the education, give the education to the, certain youths of the India, and this will be basically combination of Indian, traditions. So our traditional education along with the Western education. So that is the bottom line. That is the crux of the argument that you need to write down. So the approach of the Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore was the blend of the Indian traditional as well as the Western education, and that is why you will find out he created the Vishwa Bharati Santi Niketan. Actually, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore was not the happy with the education that was provided by the Britishers. They were giving the education to create the clerk in India, not to create the creativity. And to provide the alternative, Gurudev, he created the Vishwa Bharati Santi Niketan. So I hope now the differences in the approach of Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore is clear to all of you, right? So I hope now you got the idea. So this is the first part you will write, where you will highlight the differences between the Mahatma Gandhi and the Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. Again, as I can say, these are the two stalwarts of the Indian nationalism. So again, both represented certain higher level of the ideology, and thus this is the way you can highlight those things. I hope now you got the idea. Fine. Now let's talk about nationalism. So when we talk about nationalism of Mahatma Gandhi, as we know that Mahatma Gandhi was for the non-cooperation and passive resistance. If anyone exploit anyone, then you have the right to non-cooperate and then to resist obviously in a non-violent way against those exploitation. So exploitation के तहत आपको आवाज उठानी चाहिए, and that is why you will find out according to Mahatma Gandhi, the Britishers, they were exploiting the Indians, and that is why they have the right to come together and then raise the banner of protest against the Britishers. That is the nationalism of Mahatma Gandhi, and you will find out in this nationalism basically what he argued for, that is the composite culture of India. What is composite culture of India? Okay, composite culture, basically this concept of Mahatma Gandhi relied on all the different ethnicity, religion and all, they will, all will come together, and then they will basically raise their banner of revolt against the Britishers in a non-cooperant, non-violent and the non-cooperation way, right? Or we can say civil disobedience as well, right? So that is the idea of nationalism. If there is a exploitation, then one should raise the banner of revolt. And since Indian, they have same interests, all need to come together against the Britishers, and then they should create a beautiful nation like India. That is the nationalism of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, what about the Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore? See, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, his personality was cosmopolitan. So obviously he was a patriot, no doubt about it, but his nationalism was quite different from the nationalism of the others. So when we talk about Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, you will find out he was against the concept of, we can say, he was in favor of the internationalism. All country is your, country. So there he was against. He was against this narrow definition of the nationalism, right? That is the creating the border and then considering the other as an enemy. Because what Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore argued, this lead to the what we call as a, this is against the principle of humanism. We are the human, and as such we should adopt the policy of tolerance towards the other human. So, in that way, you will find out what was the approach of Mahatma Gandhi. The approach of Mahatma Gandhi, if somebody is exploiting, then you have right to non-cooperate, and then you have the right to civil disobedience. But in case of the Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, what he is arguing that, like Britishers and the Indians, both are the human, and Indians should not, Britishers, they are the Indians, they are the Indians. So we are the brothers, and thus we should not think in the narrow concept of nationalism. This is what argued by the Rabindranath Tagore. And that is the basic difference between the Mahatma Gandhi and the Rabindranath Tagore. In fact, you will be surprised to know what Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore said. He said the history of India is not the history of king or the conquest, or for example the chronology, evolution, but the history of India is that the people came from the outside, but we, Indians, by following the concept of humanism, that they are also the human, we assimilated them into our culture. So that is the broader idea that is purported by the Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. So this is what you need to write down here. So Mahatma Gandhi, again, he was thinking about the independence of India, where the people, having different ideology, they would come together, and then they will basically throw away the British government through the non-cooperation and the civil disobedience. On the other hand, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, he was thinking about the all world as your nation. So he had a concept of, internationalism, where every person will consider other person as a human, and then they will adopt the policy of tolerance towards each other, and thereby creating a beautiful world. So again, both had different idea, but again, both had great idea. Okay, so I hope now you got the idea. And how to conclude this? Basically, you will conclude with the again quote, again thinking line. If you have content, these are the classical areas. So you know that this, classical area, there are some balls, as a cricketer, if you play cricket, then what do you have to do? कुछ balls आपके एरिया में आएंगे, आपको उन्हें 4 और 6 में कन्वर्ट करना पड़ेगा. उनको जनरल लिख के आओगे, आपको मार्क नहीं मिलेगा. So because there will be certain Yorker, the question which you have not prepared well, right? So the area which you have prepared, just performing average is not good there. think like a Sachin Tendulkar, think like a Virat Kohli. So what they will do? Obviously they will, certain things they will predetermine ki ye aayega, and then accordingly they will have a very good content on those, so that that content will create a difference between them and the others. So accordingly, you can, this question was a very expected one, right? So on that basis, you should have created the content that will differentiate you between the others, right? So again, here you could have ended with the conclusion of Mahatma Gandhi. Okay. And Mahatma Gandhi very beautifully, he highlighted, he said, I started with the disposition, a conflict between Gurudev and myself, but ended with the glorious discovery that there was none. So what Mahatma Gandhi was trying to argue here, I started with the fact that there is a difference between the me and the Gurudev. But when I venture into the depth, I realize there is no difference between me and the Gurudev. So what a beautiful line, and obviously these lines will make huge impact to the paper, to the examiner who is checking your copy. So I hope, now see, most of the, I guess, the people I have communicated, all of them have written these answers. But what is your content and the creativity that will make you different from the others? So I hope now you got the idea. Fine. Good. Let's move to the next. Next question we have from the world history, introduction of railway, right? Introduction of railway. Now, okay. Now, what should be your thinking line here? Again, it's not a classical question that you have prepared. Again, you have to think, you have to sit in the exam, immediately you have to think, and then you have to write. So what should be your thinking line for this question, right? You can also write in the chat box. First, connectivity. Railway means what? Connectivity. So how it connected the different parts, right? So you will think from that point of view, like railway line, what will do, what railway line will do? Connect the different part, right? That is the first thinking line. Then you can think about the industrialization. Railway played very important role in the industrialization, right? Then when we talk about railway is a big industry in itself, right? From the manual labor to the engineering work. You have many employment that is given by the railway, right? So you can think in terms of the employment. Then you can also think in terms of the agriculture growth, right? It will provide the stimulus to the agriculture growth by connecting the different part, right? So that is also one of the dimensions. Then you can also think about the environment, right? Obviously the railway creation will have both positive and the negative impact on the environment, right? So now understand, the question is about world first and then socio-economic effect, right? So you need to be very limited, socio-economic and then the world. I hope now you got the idea. So see, understand this initial thinking will make the difference between you and the others. So that is what, we have always maintained. Thinking line is a key between one who, write, right? So, I mean, one who write better answers and one who do not write the best, right? So I hope now you got the idea, right? So let's talk about, okay, one more thinking line you can adopt here. Like when you will write about the connectivity of the world at this point of time was divided into the two parts. We can say there was a colony, okay, and then we have the European nation, right? So in this way, you can also write about the, Asia and Africa, what impact the railway had on the Asia and the Africa and that of the Europe. So again, that is also one of the beautiful idea or thinking you can adopt. I will try to use that. Okay, fine. So when we talk about connectivity, what railway do? Connectivity, it connect the different area, isolated area, right? It connect the different isolated area. So you will talk about what is the socio-economic impact of the connectivity, right? Socio and then economy, right? So railway basically make the different area, hinterland then we have town. It connect both of them, and that is why what happened because of that. Now the people from the hinterland, they have access to many facilities like education, healthcare, employment opportunity, right? So you will talk about that connectivity, all good. And then economy. So this is connectivity, socio impact, economic impact. Obviously this will, by connecting the town with the hinterland, it will boost the trade and commerce by reducing the cost. Railway is one of the cheapest mode of transport, right? And it will able to transport the goods from the one part to the other parts, right? So this is the way you will highlight the how connectivity lead to socio and then economic, consequences, right? That is what you will highlight. I hope now the idea is clear. Now, when we talk about India or the colonies, this is in general in the Europe. In colonies, you can talk about this also led to the this railway also unintendedly led to the rise of nationalism because of railway. For example, now understand this. Because of railway, what happened? The people from west, the people from north, people from east, and people from south. Because of railway, they came together, and then you will find out they actually later on created the Indian National Congress, right? So in this way, you will write that it led to the integration of the India both physically as well as nationalism. Okay, political nationalism. So I hope now you got the idea, right? So in the colony, you can write about the what was the impact on the colony and what is the impact on the Europe. So I hope now you got the idea. Second, now railway allowed the movement of raw material from the hinterland, right? So the raw material from the hinterland now would be supplied to the different parts, and this will help the industry to create the product, right? And then supply those finished goods to the market, right? To the all the area. So by providing those connectivity, it promoted the industrialization, particularly in the Europe. So that is the one argument you will write down, right? So railway actually provided the industrialization by supplying the raw material and the finished goods. I hope now this idea is clear. But again, what about colonies? What about colonies? In the colonies, you can write the opinion of the Karl Marx. There's a beautiful line that is given by the Karl Marx, and Karl Marx basically argued, while the railway led to the industrialization in the Europe, it led to the deindustrialization in colonies like India, right? So understand, you can such thinking, again I said thinking will make huge difference. So in the colonies, you will find out while in the Europe it led to the industrialization, while in the colony, according to the Karl Marx, it led to the deindustrialization. So I hope now you got the idea. Employment, already we have discussed, it provided the employment, huge employment right from the manual labor to the what we can say skillful and the engineers, right? Economic, what is the economic impact? Again, it led to the reduction in poverty, improvement in the living condition of the people, right? So in this way you will argue what is the impact of the railway. Again, economic already we have discussed, and the socio-economic. Then I hope now idea is clear. Now because of railway, what will happen? The people from different area now they will come together with each other, right? So that will lead to what? That will lead to social exchange among the people, and that's a very, very important impact. Now understand, railway allowed the movement from people from one area to the other area. Just for example, now let's talk about India. So we had a concept of purity and pollution. The problem of interdining, intersitting and all, right? So you will find out because of the railway, whatever the berth is allocated to you, irrespective of your caste, class, reason, varna, you will sit together. So understand, this is the way you will argue for socio-economic, right? So in socio-economic, what happened? It basically, it basically minimized the differences among the people, and it allowed the cultural exchange between the people. So that is the way you will write the socio impact, and then you will talk about economic impact. Again, understanding of the culture further led to the economic integration between the various different parts of the world, right? So in this way you will argue for the cultural exchange and the social integration. And finally, you can talk about agriculture growth. I guess you can write down this, right? Agriculture growth means what? It by connecting the different area and also the different part, it provided the more market for the agricultural product. So you can say, what is the socio impact? What is the social impact on the society? So obviously farmer, they got the better market, and because of that, what happened? They have an increased income and the better living standard, right? So that is what you will argue. And obviously you will talk about the economic one. Agriculture growth led to the food production, again, economic development and so on. And finally, you will talk about the environment, right? So again, what is the social impact? Or we can say, obviously they provided the alternative to the fossil fuel. So that is a important impact. And then you will talk about you can talk about the economic impact, right? So the exploitation because of the railway and the consequent polluted the environment in the Europe as well as in the other parts of the world. So in this way you will take these dimensions and then you will write down the answers. I hope now you got the idea. Fine. Okay. Now again, one of the classical question, what is the main features of the Vedic society, right? Features of Vedic society and then Vedic religion. Okay. Straightforward, what should be thinking line? You have to write about features, understand, features of Vedic society and the Vedic religion. And then you will write about, how these features is a part of the Indian society even today. What are the features from Vedic is a part of the present society as well, right? So I hope now you got the idea. Now what should be your thinking line here? What should be your thinking line? See, when we talk about Vedic society, what do you mean by Vedic society? Again, we have two different society here. We have Rig Vedic society. Okay, Rig Vedic society. You cannot write a general answers here. Understand? Again, thinking part, right? So Rig Vedic society, and then we have later Vedic society or religion. We can say later Vedic. Rig Vedic and the later Vedic, and understand both society were quite different than each other. So those aspirant who will write one common point, obviously they will fetch less mark as compared to the aspirant who will have this thought and will divide it into the Rig Vedic and the later Vedic, because both society and the religion were different. Now, why different, sir? Understand, when we talk about Rig Vedic society, understand this point. Rig Vedic society was a tribal society. These are the people who basically used to rear the cattle. ठीक है, ये गाय वो को चराने वाली सोसाइटी थी. सो उस तरीके की सोसाइटी है. तो सोसाइटी और रिलीजन उसी तरीके से आएगा. This need to be your thinking line. What about later Vedic? Later Vedic was a agricultural society, and now you will find out in the agricultural society there is a concept of land owning, right? Property owning. Okay, so you will find out the society of later Vedic, it is a agricultural society. Rig Vedic, it's a tribal society, and thus obviously both are going to have different societal features and the religion. I hope now you got the idea. Okay, this is very, very important thinking. If you, for example, those people who have written the common Vedic society features, obviously they will be in trouble. Because what do you mean by Vedic society? The common concept is that Rig Vedic and then we have later Vedic. I hope now this point is clear to all of you, right? Let's talk about the society. There are three important parts: society, religion and how it influenced the current Indian society, right? So we will begin with the society first, right? Society, and you can write in a comparative format, right? So in society, when we talk about, let's begin with the Rigvedic society. See, when we talk about societal framework, what should be your thinking line? Particularly, we can have two thinking line. First, social stratification. Was there division among the society? Okay. What is the division in the society? Because inequality is a part of society, right? When you have development, and obviously those development will not be equally shared among the people. And thus, social stratification, understand, social stratification, is a part of the society. So first thinking line, and second, what was the condition of women, right? So position of women. You can write many points here, but again, these are the two important, given that you have to write so many things. These two need to be at least written that, right? So social stratification. Now Rigvedic, what kind of tribal society? Rigvedic society was a tribal society. So when we talk about tribal society, now what kind of tribe, what kind of society tribal people have? Since, see, there is no concept of land, that means there is a very, little distinctions among the people. So that is the first point you will write. It is more or less egalitarian society. Egalitarian means equal society. See, there is not much gap between the people, right? Because again, the concept of land is not there, because these people were tribal in nature. They used to move from the one part to the other. And until and unless you settle down, there is no concept of land ownership. And thus, obviously, people were more or less egalitarian. I hope now you got the idea, right? And second, now understand, there was no caste system. See, there is not much difference among the people, and that is why we do not have that caste system, or we can say Varna system here, And most important here, the occupation was not based on the birth. Okay, anybody can perform anything. Occupation was not based on the birth. Okay. So I hope now you got the idea, right? Let's talk about later Vedic, social stratification in the later Vedic, right? Social stratification in the later Vedic. Now, later Vedic was an agricultural society. In agricultural society, we have the concept of land ownership. And this concept of land ownership, some people may have more land and some people will have less land. That would lead to what we call as a discrimination or the social stratification in the society. And that stratification was given in the form of the Varna system. So you will write about, now there is a stratification in the society, and we have, Purusukt Haim, which talks about, four division into the society. First we have Brahman, followed by the Kshatriya, then we have Vaisya, then we have Shudra, right? So, in this way you will argue, right? I hope now you got the idea. So when we talk about Rigvedic society, not a stratified society, later Vedic being an agricultural society, stratified society, right? What about position of women? See, again, there was very less difference between the men and the women, because it's a tribal society. The concept of land is, all those ideas is it to be there, and thus you will find out, though it was a patriarchal society. Patriarchal means the male have more prominence than the female, but you will find out position of the women was better than the corresponding later period, right? So this is the way you will argue, right? I hope now you got the idea. Okay, for example, you can give the example, the women had right to education. For example, we hear the educated women like Ghosa, Apala, right? You can give that idea. Then you will talk about, there was no sati, there was no prevalence of sati, there was no prevalence of child marriages. Okay, The women had right to choose their partner, right? So this is the way you will argue. Though the women of the position of the women was not equal to the male, but they certainly had certain right in the Rigvedic society. In the later Vedic society, all those rights were taken away. And for example, we also have the beginning of child marriages, the problem of sati, and so on. And the condition of women started to deteriorate. So this is the way you will argue. But I hope now you got the idea how you should use various content and where you're thinking to write the answer. So this is the bottom line, Vedic society and the later Vedic society. Fine. Okay. Now religion. Similarly, again we have Rigvedic religion, right? When we talk about Rigvedic religion, now understand here. So obviously it's we can say it's a primitive religion, primitive naturalism, right? What do you mean by primitive naturalism? Certain forces they were not able to understand, natural forces they were not able to understand, and thus they started worshipping those forces. For example, they had no idea about the rainfall, and that is why they created the Lord Indra, who was responsible for the rainfall. Then Lord Varun, who basically managed those ritus, right? So in this way, their important features was primitive naturalism. Certain natural features not able people were not able to understand, and that is why they started worshipping those natural forces. The word is primitive naturalism. And then primitive animism, certain like bull worship and all, certain animal they are considered for sacred for their power and all, and that is why they are worshipped by the people. So they also believed in the primitive animism. That is the part you will highlight. And then you will highlight then why people worship the god here. So people worship the god for the materialistic reason. See, you worship the god for two things. Either for philosophy of you want certain something in return from the god. And you will find out here the people they worship the god for materialistic reason, means they wanted the good son who can fight in the war. They wanted the when they want to go to the war, they wanted the wealth, victory into the war. So in this way, why people worship the god? They worship the god for materialistic reason. And third important feature, it was a tribal and patriarchal. Tribal and the patriarchal. Again, this is a classical question. As I said, certain ball you can hit for 4 and 6. You have to produce quality content to fetch very good marks, right? And that is why in this question you have to write good content. By writing, sir, kaam chal jayega. Nahi. That should not be approach if you want to be like Sachin Tendulkar or the Virat Kohli. Certain question from your your area, provide the good content. Don't write very general answers. Okay, fine. So tribal and patriarchal, right? See, this is a tribal society, and obviously the religion will reflect their tribal way of life. How do you see the Lord Indra, who was a war god, right? Lord Indra, who was a war god, basically he represented the tribal leader, right? So the way tribal leader fight a war, similarly the Lord Indra, he also fight against the evil forces. So that is again a tribal concept. And patriarchal means most of the gods were the male god. Most of the important gods were the male god. For example, Lord Indra, Lord Agni, Lord Varun, they were the three prominent gods, and all were the male gods. We have a very few female gods, and they were not important. So it was a patriarchal society, right? It was a patriarchal religious life. I hope now you got the idea. Now, in the Vedic, in the we can say later Vedic, what is the important change happen? See, there are significant change happen in the later Vedic, particularly now the naturalism, primitive naturalism went, gave way to the more complex, and now we have an agricultural society, the land-based society. And who created this land? Lord Prajapati. And thus you will find out in a agricultural society, okay, Lord Prajapati, who created the Brahman, right? Who created the Brahman? Now Lord Prajapati, he became the most important god. That is what you have to understand here, right? So in a agricultural society, now you will find out Lord Prajapati became very important god along with the Lord Vishnu, who was the maintainer of those land, right? So this is the way you will write down. Now second, sacrifices became very prominent. Okay, earlier sacrifices was not that much prominent, but now you will find out sacrifices became very prominent, and you can give the example of Vaswamedh, Vajpayee and the other sacrifices, right? So that is the, you can highlight here. And then you can highlight again, it was like the Rigvedic, it was also the patriarchal religious life. Okay, so in this way you will highlight the differences between the Vedic and Vedic and the Rigvedic religion. So you can add more point and all, but I hope now you got the thinking line. What should be the thinking line that you need to adopt to write the answers? Fine. Okay. Now, what are the features that is still prevalent in our society, right? Features. You can talk about first Varna system. Though you will write like this. Though modernization have impacted the Varna and the caste system, right? But still the caste system is very prevalent in India. Okay, and in fact many of the occupation still even today is based on the caste, right? That is the way you will write down. Though the modernization like railway, Western education and all, they have broken the caste system, but it is still a part of the Indian society. In fact, you can write down the data where you can highlight even today, at least there are 3,000, not one, 3,000 caste and the subcaste, and between this caste interdining and the intermarriages is not permitted. Okay, so again that is the the way you will highlight. Then Indian society is a patriarchal society, right? Though there's a empowerment of the women, right, over the years, but still the if you look at the marriage norms and all, still it is a patriarchal society, right? So that you will highlight. Joint family system, again it was from the Vedic society, you will highlight, right? When we talk about the practice of adopting the children, it is also prevalent in present society. That is also from the started from the Vedic society. Then you will talk about religious in society. You can also talk about religions here. Cattle, and Gai Hamari Mata, right? So cow worshipping, cattle is a very sacred animal. It's coming from the Vedic society. The evolution of Hinduism, right? Various god like Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu and all, the beginning was actually made in the Vedic period. So the evolution of Hinduism actually started from the Vedic society and it is prevalent even today. So you will highlight those things. Then very important, the beginning of spiritualism. India is known as a spiritual world, and you will find out the concept of karma, reincarnation. It started in the reincarnation and many other things started in the Vedic period. It still is a part of the Indian society. So in this way you will highlight society and the religion, how the Vedic society still is a part of certain aspect is still is a part of the Indian culture. And in the conclusion basically you will highlight that though certain aspect is applicable, but with the modern education, the intermingling among the people in the urban areas, modern infrastructure, the gap is narrowing. Okay, so in this way you will highlight the you will write this answer. I hope now you got the idea. Fine, let's move to the next question. Again, a very important one, right? Various technological change that is started by the Sultanate, right? Delhi Sultan, and how that impacted the society. So what should be your thinking line, right? What should be your thinking line? Okay, we can divide it into the like technological change in agriculture, right? technological change in the crafts, right? Many aspirant, they will just start writing, don't do that. Take the thinking line, right? Have the thinking line, okay? So agriculture, then craft, and then you can talk about military technology, various development in the military technology, technology in the art and culture, particularly constructions work, right? So these are the dimensions you can take while writing the answers that make that will make very good flow of the answers. That is the first thinking line you need to evolve. And then if you look at the question also talk about the influence on the Indian society. Now again, this is how to write this. You can also write later on. You can have the you can write this after writing the technological changes, or you can also write at the same point. You can highlight the technology, these are the change, and that is the impact on the society. So that will be a better model if you write the answers. I hope now you got the idea, right? So when we talk about agriculture, so what kind of technological change that was introduced by the Delhi Sultanate? First, there was the irrigation technology called as a Persian wheel, right? And what happened because of this? What is the, that was introduced by the Delhi Sultanate. In fact, you will be, that was introduced by the, and what is the impact? Impact, you will write down. This help in the irrigation on a wider scale, and that actually provided the more agriculture surplus, leading to economic prosperity. So this is the way you will highlight the first important impact in the agriculture. Second, we can talk about the gardener. We can talk about the Gaj-e-Sikandari in the agriculture itself. Gaj-e-Sikandari. This was introduced by the Lodi dynasty. Okay. What is Gaj-e-Sikandari? It's a instrument for the measure of the land revenue. Land measurement instrument, right? Now what happened? What is the impact? This, measurement unit made the collection of land revenue more efficient than the earlier period. So that is the way you will argue. And then third, you will talk about various canal were built by the Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Okay. So, he built various canal and all, and that canal obviously helped to, provide the better irrigation and thereby the agriculture surplus and the economic prosperity. So in agriculture, you will talk about three important change that is brought by the Delhi Sultanate: Persian wheel, Gaj-e-Sikandari, and the various canal that was created by the Firoz Shah Tughlaq, particularly in the Haryana and the Punjab belt, which later on played very important role in the Green Revolution. Okay, so in agriculture, you will talk about these three important change, right? Now, craft. When we talk about craft, very important and the significant change, we have spinning wheel, charkha, So beginning, we can say the beginning of spinning wheel was actually started by the Delhi Sultanate people, and this is, for the first time it was referred by the book called as a Futu as Salatin. There's a book, Futu as Salatin. This for the first time refer the technology of spinning wheel, and it was one of the revolutionary change. And you will be surprised to know that this increased the production of the cotton by 6 times. That is the impact of introducing the spinning wheel. So what is the impact? It increased the production of cotton by 6 times, right? So that is what you will write down. Then we have carder bow. In the craft we have carder bow. Now this carder bow basically helped the selections of the, basically selected the better cotton. Cotton is a raw material, right? So again, you have to make it as a raw material, right? So it basically help to clean the cotton seeds, and obviously this was introduced after the attacks of the Mahmud Ghazni. So again, it is also one of the contributions of the Delhi Sultanate. And what is the impact? Spinning wheel along with the cardinal bow revolutionized the cotton industry. Okay, that is what you will write down. And third, you will talk about treadle loom. Okay, treadle loom. In craft, we have treadle loom. ट्रिडल लूम बेसिकली जैसे आपने देखा होगा कि जो कुछ पैर से वो ऐसे करते हैं और पहिया घूमते रहता है, राइट, दैट काइंड ऑफ, अगर आपने किसी टेलर के पास देखा होगा, राइट. सो ट्रिडल लूम बेसिकली अर्लियर द वीवर दे नीड टू देयर लेग यू नीड टू बी आइडल, वैसे बैठे रहते थे. बट नाउ विद द ट्रिडल लूम दे कैन आल्सो यूज देयर लेग, एंड दिस विल अगेन रिवोल्यूशनाइज द cotton industry. So understand, just write about three things in the cotton, particularly spinning wheel, cardinal bow, and the treadle loom. This was invented by the, this was brought by the Delhi Sultan, and it revolutionized the cotton industry. I hope now you got the idea, right? Then next craft, paper. Understand, the beginning of paper and book binding started by the Delhi Sultan. And now what happened because of this? Knowledge started to disseminate from one part to the other. Now you can write on the paper, and the paper, that it can be stored in a significant way. So you will find out, for example, there was a Chinese scholar Ma Human. He came to India, and then he talked about, so again, he talked about the introduction of paper in the Bengal by the Delhi Sultan, right? So in this way, you will find out paper and book binding. Again, this is a very revolutionary change in the sense it allowed the knowledge dissemination from the one part to the other, right? So that is what you will find out. And then when we talk about next, we have wine distillation, okay? Wine distillation, so that again have both positive as well as the negative impact, right? So ये तुम आराम से लिख सकते हो, right? Wine distillation. And then we have block printing, tin coating, glass, various other technology that was brought in the craft. So I hope now at least you got the idea, right? Then military technology. So understand, military, when we talk about military technology, we have Nawak. This is a Persian bow. ठीक है, उनके बार थोड़े से अलग थे, and that is why it can go to the longer distance. Okay, so you can talk about Persian bow, and then they also, we used to use the rope strap to control the horses. ठीक है, घोड़े को कंट्रोल करने के लिए हमारे पास रस्सी के वो हुआ करते थे. Now they brought the iron. So that provided the better movement to the control over the horses. So iron strap was also very important development. And then we have Nal. So understand, the Persian bow, iron strip, and the Nal, it actually strengthened the Indian army, and then obviously the cavalry became very prominent. Earlier the chariot was very important. Because of this technology, now the cavalry became the main force of the army. So that is the way you will write down. And then you will talk about art and culture. Last point, art and culture. Now understand, the Islamic people, they came from the outside, and that is why they brought the new technology in construction work. That is what we call as the arch and dome, right? They started the arcuate method that was different from the Indian methods. And this arch and dome obviously had different constructions technology. All good? And what happened because of this? This led to the, what is the impact? Indo-Islamic, we have new architecture called as the Indo-Islamic architecture, and it also led to the rise of the urban center on a larger scale. So in this way, you will highlight the various impact if you have good thinking line like agriculture, craft, military, art and culture. If you just start writing, without having the thinking line, then after certain point, you will find it very difficult to write those content. But again, if you take the thinking, then you will realize you have so many content. Now your challenge is to put all those content into the answer writing, right? So I hope now you got the idea. Okay, let's conclusion. You can highlight. In the conclusion, I can give one of the important conclusion here. See, all this technological change obviously promoted the economy, and all brought the economic prosperity, but also had socio, important impact on the society. For example, you can highlight the transformation of the Jat from tribe as a peasant, and later on the development of Sikhism. So in this way, you will highlight all this technology led to the rise of Jat. Okay, and then later the rise of Sikhism. So you have to connect the rise of the various change. Obviously, it impacted the economy, but also the society. And in this case, you can give the example of Jat, who later on transform themselves into the peasant, and then later on we see the rise of the Sikhism. All good. So in this way, you will give the wonderful conclusion. Fine. Okay. Let's talk about the last question. Again, what should be your thinking line? Tribal. This is again classical question, right? Classical one. I guess the easiest of the lot, right? So what should be your thinking line, right? Now, what were the causes that led to the tribal revolt indirectly, right? How how colonial rule affected the tribals, via their policy, political policy, economic policy, social policy, right? So what should be your thinking line? Your thinking line should be, what was the political policy that affected the tribal? What is the economic policy that affected the tribal? What is the socio-cultural policy, or we can say socio-religious policy that affected the tribals, right? That is the way you will think, and how they responded. Obviously, you will see the proto-nationalist revolt, tribal revolt, right? Tribal revolt is also called as a proto-nationalist revolt. Initially, you will find out all this tribal revolt, they will raise their banner of revolt against the British colonialism, and then you will talk about in the later phase, particularly during the reign of Mahatma Gandhi, this tribal were integrated with the Indian nationalism. Okay, so that is the way you will that is the thinking line you need to adopt here. So first, understand what is the thinking line, what were the political, economical and the socio-religious cause. And second, many people, they will just write the revolt. If you have narrow thinking line, then you will write about just the revolt, revolt. You won't think tribal participation into the Indian nationalism. Why tribe became the part of the Indian nationalism? It is because of the various economic, socio-religious and the political exploitation that was done by the Britishers. I hope now you got the idea. All good? Fine? Okay. Now, quickly, let's begin with the economic causes or economic policy. Now, Britishers, see, the tribal people, they relied on the forest resources. Britishers, via the Forest Act of 1865. Forest Act of 1865, they basically restricted the control, access of the tribe over the forest, because the Britishers required the forest for their navy purpose. They wanted the wood for the creation of railway, right? So Britishers, they required the forest, and that is why they control the access of the tribe over the forest. But they used to live on that forest, and that is why forest people, they were not happy. That is the first. Second, we have Kunkuti concept. Kunkuti concept is a concept where the tribe consider everything as a property of community. They believe in the concept of community property, not the individual property, right? So you will find out they followed the Kunkuti customs where the property was owned by the entire tribe, not by the individual. But Britishers, they brought the concept of individual property ownership, and all these tribal people, they were not happy, right? So that is the way you will highlight. And then you will talk about, like, the exploitation of merchant, jamindar, and all other agent, intermediary of the British government. For example, you can talk about Santhal rebellion, Santhal rebellion. What is the background of the Santhal rebellion? They used to cultivate the area, then the merchant, jamindar, they used to come back to that area, they used to take those area from them, लैंड रेवेन्यू के बदले लोन दे दिया, देन उसके बाद वो साइकिल अल्टीमेटली सांथाल जो होंगे वो अपनी जमीन खो देंगे, देन अगेन दे विल माइग्रेट टू न्यू एरिया, दे विल ब्रिंग दोज एरिया अंडर द कल्टीवेशन बाय कटिंग द फॉरेस्ट, अगेन ऑल दिस मर्चेंट जमींदार दे विल गो बैक टू दैट एरिया, अगेन दे विल पुल द दिस इनोसेंट tribal people, again bringing their, so that is what you will highlight, right? Merchant, the exploitation of merchant jameen, right? So these are the economical. You can add one two or more point, right? So main reason was the economic one: forest act, Kunkudi system, the exploitation by the merchant jamindar, and so on. So obviously tribe were not happy because of the economic change that was brought by the Britishers. That is the first part. Then you will talk about socio-religious. See, understand, all tribe, they are religiously very conservative people. Tribe believe in their cultural pride. They believe in their cultural superiority. They have their unique cultural and the religious practices. But now understand, how do you see the activity of the Christian missionaries? And Christian missionaries, they will try to bring, they will try to convert those innocent tribal, and obviously every tribe, they respected their religion, and that brought the conflict. So the tribe did not like the various activities of the Christian missionaries. This is the way you will highlight. And finally, you will highlight the political and the administrative reason. See, Britishers brought the new, judicial system and so on. Now, in the new judicial system, you require the, you require the lawyers, you require money to approach to get the justice. But it was impossible for the tribal people to have the lawyer and then, present their case in the court of law. So, because of the new administrative system, they got, they got no access to the justice. Okay, so they had grievances, but they had no access to the justice, and that is why you will find out, because of this, what happened. They ultimately decided to revolt against the British government. So we have various revolt. Just highlight those revolts: Santhal rebellion, all those tribal revolt. Just mention their name and so on. So you will highlight, so they revolted, and in the later part you will write that they realized the revolt had certain limitations, so they decided to participate with the Indian nationalism along with the Mahatma Gandhi. So they became the integral part of the Indian nationalism and played very important role in the non-cooperation, civil disobedience, and the Quit India movement. So in this way you will present your ideas. I hope now you got the idea, right? So tribal, economic, socio, then political, administrative. What is the, their response? Their response was to, initially they revolted, which we have proto-nationalist movement, right? And then finally we have, they became the part of the integral part of the Indian nationalism. So I hope now you got the idea. And as I have maintained, I started with the one thing. What is the mark in UPSC? Mark in UPSC is a interplay of two things. That is, first, your content, and now content is very easily available. So what quality of content? As you have seen, we begin with the Mera Ben quote with respect to the Rabindranath Tagore and the Mahatma Gandhi. Very few people have done that, right? Particularly my student, they will do it, right? So in that case, obviously they will have edge over the others. So again, quality content. It is not just the content. Some question you require to provide the quality, and then crafting. How innovative thinking you can adopt within that time frame. It's difficult but not impossible, right? So how most of the aspirant in the mains, they have same content, but they will have different mark because of their thinking process, right? So as I have discussed the Rabindranath Tagore, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi, see, understand, both have different ideas, right? One is talking about you should pursue the education for your self reliance, like why you are studying to become the IAS. So that is what you need to keep in mind. That is content. That is Mahatma Gandhi. What is Rabindranath Tagore? Rabindranath Tagore was talking about the crafting, thinking, creativity. If you be Mahatma Gandhi and the Rabindranath Tagore, then nobody can stop you from clearing this exam. And this is what we have always maintained. So anyway, if you have any doubt with respect to the answer writing, if you face any problem, if you feel free to connect to us. Then now Smriti ma'am, the next distinguished faculty, she will take up the sociology question. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I'm Smriti Rao Mishra. I'm the faculty for GS Society and Sociology. Let us analyze the 2023 paper for Indian society. First and foremost, let us have an overview of what kind of questions came this year. This year as well, we have observed that up to 6 questions have been asked from the society section, 3 10 markers and 3 15 markers, which rounds off to about a good 75 marks. The idea of the exam this year was fairly simple. We have noticed that the questions have been more direct. They're less analytical, less application based, and more direct in context with the syllabus. The trend, however, we have noticed in the previous year that more questions were asked from the first unit, which is unity in diversity. This year also we have observed 3 questions being asked from the same. The questions have been pertaining to family as an institution, marriage as an institution, and there have been 3 intersectional questions where we have observed urbanization, we have tried to look at the post-liberal economy, the intersectionality in terms of different concepts, different subheadings in the syllabus. We will come to each part of it. In this question, let us begin with our analysis. The question states, do you think marriage as a sacrament is losing its value in modern India? This is a standard topic which we cover under the family as an institution and marriage as an institution. First and foremost, to address this question, we need to analyze how marriage has been seen as a social institution in the Indian context. From a religious perspective, we consider it to be a dharma under the Hindu religious order, the fulfillment of the duty under the Grihastha ashram, and in various religious overtones, we have observed that it is seen as a sacrament, indicating that there is some value attached with it. There is some component of religious orientation which is associated. It is not merely a mundane activity. In India, traditionally, we have observed that being married to someone is not just about 2 individuals making a decision. So it has an impact on various social institutions, particularly if we observe on the building of a family, the relationship between 2 families that get married. Furthermore, on the society, in terms of the organization under the kinship pattern. We have also observed that the caste-based social institution has driven this idea of sacrilegious social relationships in the form of marriage. Here we have also observed that certain social contracts, the form of social contract has been seen through marriage as a social institution. It also provides some kind of a social and an economic security. However, the question is asking, do you think it's losing its value? First and foremost, the orientation of this question is change orientation. How was marriage seen in the earlier societies and how it is seen in the present society? As we keep indicating in our classes, whenever we are looking at change orientation, it is important that we look at the previous situation, previous phenomena, present situation. What are the catalysts for this kind of a change? This is the approach we have to take. In the previous scenario, we will explain the role of marriage as a sacrament. The catalyst for this change could be seen through various social processes. What are these processes? We have observed urbanization, industrialization, westernization, modernization, globalization, secularization. These are some processes which have rendered a character of change in various social institutions. Similarly with marriage, how exactly have they initiated change? We see they have led to a heightened sense of individualism, democratization of identity. What does that mean? Traditionally, gender norms or gender roles would dictate which person was supposed to do what within the marriage setup. What was the man supposed to do? What was the woman supposed to do in terms of their occupation, in terms of their everyday activity and social life? Through these social processes, however, we see there is a breakdown of that gender normativity, gender stereotyping. So gender norms or roles have changed. There is democratization of individuals. Furthermore, we see that the caste orientation, which was heavily determined in the traditional society, is also slightly subjected to various secular attitude. Now, because of this, what are the changes that we have observed? New forms of marriages have come about. What are the new forms of marriages we are observing here? You can look at how there are live-in arrangements. A term called assortative mating can be quoted over here. This is a term which often appears in the newspaper articles. So for various aspects, it is imperative that we read the newspaper articles and try to align it with those standard topics which are there in our syllabus. What does assortative meeting indicate? Where we are choosing the partner that we want to get married to on the basis of the occupational position, on the basis of academic qualification, whether our mindset matches with them or not. You may have heard about the IIT, IIM, Shadi.com and so on. So this is an example of the same. So here we are observing that there is a trend which moves towards more secular identity. People are looking for companionship rather than merely fulfilling the duties as the sacrament order in the traditional societies would be seen. Furthermore, we will also notice over here that there is a change in the way in which organization of couples is taking place. Online dating can be provided as an example. Same-sex relationships can be given as an example. Traditionally, heteronormativity was practiced. Today, we are looking into heterosexual couple as well. Of course, there's a debate running on that whether the same-sex marriages should be legalized or not. But this indicates the change. This indicates the role of sacrament, the role of traditional values, moving towards cultural syncretism, individualism, democratization, and so on. Furthermore, we are also looking at delayed marriages. We are looking at online dating. We are looking at weekend marriages. All of these are indicating that merely having sacrament as the cornerstone or the base of a marriage is no longer the, let us say, the logical reason why people tend to get together. Furthermore, we are observing the trend in the most developed countries or developing countries, let us say in Scandinavian countries. We are observing that people are inching towards not having a very contractual marriage. So this remains to be a social contract rather than a civil contract. In Indian society, we are also looking at court marriages take prevalence or love marriages take prevalence, although there's merely about 11% of people who are engaged in love marriage, cross-cutting the caste dimension, ethnicity dimension, religious dimension. However, here we have to indicate that even though there is a slight change in the reason why people tend to get married, it has shifted slightly away from sacramental duties. However, marriage as an institution has not lost its relevance in the modern society. So there is no deinstitutionalization per se. However, newer forms have emerged. Going forward, you can indicate the significance that this social institution has on individuals, on family, and on the wider society. It's a fairly easy question which you can address in the manner that we have seen. What were the traditional forms? Why was it a sacrament? What were the catalysts of the change? And what new forms of marriages have emerged? Lastly, indicating the significance that it is not losing its value. It has retained its function and purpose. However, it has changed its form and practice. Let us look at the next question here. This question says, explain why suicide among young women is increasing in the Indian society. Now, this is a question which could have been addressed if you were reading a little bit of newspaper articles, since it's not directly out of the standard textbooks. However, there are two surveys which we need to keep a watch out for, which is the NFHS 5, which is the NCRB data, and along with that, a various number of articles and surveys do pop up. Now, this question we can say is an intersectionality of two areas in the syllabus. First and foremost, where we are looking at women as a component of family structure, of family as an institution, which lies under the subheading of unity in diversity. That is the first section. The second section, if we are referring to a problem, we will analyze it in terms of transformation, social transformation, socially disadvantaged section of the population, and what can lead to their social transformation. So this can be seen as a generic question which could be addressed with a little bit of understanding of the current affairs, with a little bit of common sense. Furthermore, try to contextualize your argument in terms of the broader subheadings of the syllabus. Now, how do we approach this? First and foremost, we would notice that suicide has to be seen in terms, it is defined in terms of an act which is intentional taking of one's life due to various underlying causes. Now, these underlying causes could be ranging from, let us say, social causes, psychological causes. For better contextualization, I'm not adding the biological component where euthanasia can also be one of the aspects. Particularly the word adjective young women points our attention to the fact what is the social, institutional and structural role in having a conducive, in creating a conducive environment for the young women. Here, family and marriage become important. These are the social institutions which may have an impact on women's social standing and on their mental health. With relevance to family and marriage, we can see divorce harassment, domestic violence. We have also observed during the pandemic what was called as shadow pandemic, where women were not able to find respite because of their lack of social mobility during the pandemic period and enhanced or heightened domestic violence. Again, NFHS data can be utilized in certain context over here. Furthermore, we also have to analyze the impact that, let us say, early marriages have on a woman's psyche. Early marriages or multiple marriages, which we can look at in terms of polygamy. What kind of an impact it may have on different individuals, young women specifically. And apart from this, we also see harassment of various kinds, which could be sexual harassment, mental harassment, psychological harassment, which may lead to a certain kind of seclusion, lack of avenues for individuals to discuss their problems, be it marital problems, be it various other problems. Broadly, we have discussed the societal institutional problems. Apart from that, we can also see certain other issues related with the individual young women. It could be in terms of the education. We have noticed that there is heightened rate of suicides seen among the IIT students. So the kind of mental pressure that they have to bear in pursuit of their academic goals can be quoted as a reason. Furthermore, we can also mention the lack of social security and safety net in city or urban based mobility, or even in the rural areas. So this kind of a burden leads to mental depression, clinical depression. It can have financial stress. It can have a lack of sensitivity. Furthermore, you can also quote over here the impact of other social institution in terms of, let us say, media, social media, internet space, certain issues such as commodification, cancel culture, or let us say where there is sexual objectification of women. These kind of aspects also lead to a careful mental scrutiny, which may compel one to commit suicide. This can also be quoted over here. Here, particular importance is the NFHS data, and recently the Supreme Court had argued that the time period, the cooling off period for one to get divorced should be reduced. They have quoted certain aspects which I'm going to read out. One is that women face limited mobility. They are restricted financial autonomy. Due to marital control and spousal abuse, there is lack of freedom of movement. Almost 80% of married women do not share their condition. So if they are applying for a divorce, it could be on the grounds of mental harassment, on the grounds of sexual issues. And if this divorce is not filed in a good enough time period, then it may lead to death of that concerned individual. In our everyday news, we have come across a lot of instances where women have been subjected to domestic violence to the extent that they have given up on their life. They're only survived by their children. So we will look into these two aspects of stigmatization, otherization, social exclusion, gender issues, patriarchy as certain reasons why there could be certain kind of a psychological depression. However, bear in mind, since this is a problem statement that we are looking at, try to incorporate certain way forward. How do we provide solution? How do we provide a platform for their grievance redressal? Here we can refer to the National Mental Helpline. We can refer to the role of NGOs, of civil society. We can also refer to some kind of, let us say, institutional mechanism that can be provided from the end of the government support. Now, if you are addressing these certain issues which are leading to this kind of a suicide rate, if you are able to carefully calculate them, then going forward, perhaps this fluctuation or aberration can be limited or controlled. And furthermore, with the help of education, counseling, with the help of moral understanding, it may be effectively changed. Particularly, bear it in mind that we are not going to emphasize on psychological issues or on clinical depression. We are going to emphasize on the societal parameters which may lead to psychological issues. Since this is a paper of Indian society, we will bear in mind what are the key determinants of this paper with respect to the exam. Fairly easy question which can be addressed properly. However, the key aspect over here is that your answer should be well structured. To structure your answer, always try to think about the components that you can split it into, how to make your answer more organized, have a logical flow in the answer. Try to correlate it with broader subheadings. Think of dimensions, think of avenues, which will ultimately reflect in a better presentation of the content, since these kind of questions appear to be too generic and commonsensical. Let us look at the next question here. It says child cuddling is now being replaced by mobile phones. Discuss its impact on socialization of children. I hope you're able to look at which part of the syllabus this pertains to. Yet again, here we are looking at family, marriage, kinship, which comes under unity in diversity under social institutions of importance in the Indian society. And similarly, in social transformation, we look at children as a particular vulnerable component of the population. This question, however, appears to be a social psychology question. It was not a disciplinarian question that they have included. It is something that we see in a generic everyday understanding. You may have observed around you lately that all the children are being given with a mobile, provided with a mobile phone. YouTube for children is playing on, and this makes the work of the parents easy to a certain extent because their nagging reduces. However, this question points out to the importance and significance of socialization among children. So how do we address this? You may have come across certain theories such as the Maslow's need hierarchy in psychology or Kohlberg's theory of moral development, which we study in ethics. Very briefly, you can indicate why it is important for proper socialization of children to take place. It is in fact the role of the parents, the role of the grandparents, neighbors, educational institutions, the entire society. Like they say, it takes an entire village to raise a child. Similarly, over here, traditionally we have seen that the impact of technology was not so pronounced as it is today. Very briefly, you can mention what are the aspects that the child's psychology is dependent on. Here you can indicate the health of the child in terms of your three aspects, which are the mental health, physical health, psychological health. Pertaining to mental health, it is of utmost importance that in the early development stages, the formative stages, there should be a hand-hand dexterity that must be there. This coordination is essential for development of their cognitive skills. However, where initially children were taught to, let us say, organize things, arrange, play with numbers, play with colors, use physical toys of the sorts, lately this has been replaced with mobile phones. So what kind of an impact does that have on the child? Of course, there is going to be strain on the eyes, there is going to be strain on the brain. There are certain surveys and reports which indicate that the way in which social media has been designed is to scroll things up using your thumbs in such a manner that it becomes addictive. You become used to it to such a large extent that when you're not able to have access to it, it may have a disturbing impact. A lot of videos also floated on social media where the child was asleep and they were just scrolling mindlessly. So this kind of an impact is seen not only on their cognitive impairment, but with their psychological development as well. Here, however, we are speaking about child cuddling. Child cuddling indicates the role of family, the role of parents over here. It is imperative that the parents spend time, they understand the human touch so that the children are able to develop a sense of security, develop a sense of well-being and individualism by being in constant contact with their parents. However, lately, because of the mobile phones, we have seen the amount of quality time that the children and the parents spend has reduced. Socialization is taking place through a virtual space. This may have an impact on alienation. This may have an impact on different aspects of their health. Furthermore, because of watching, let us say, the mobile phones while eating, there could be problems associated with triple burden of malnutrition. It could be undernutrition, overnutrition, malnutrition, which can have an impact on their overall health. So here, since again we have mentioned a problem statement, going forward you can indicate how do we address this? We can address this by increasing the family time. There is the happiness curriculum which has been included in the Delhi schools based on the inspiration from the Scandinavian countries. So incorporating yoga, meditation, more time between the parent and the child, parent-child development, which is now also seen in the higher levels up where we are looking at companies that have parent-child interaction in the physical space of the company. So here we can indicate that since the technological advancement has percolated to various aspects of the life, it is very important and it's of crucial significance at the early age on, we ensure that there is a time out. There is a limited time for digital interaction and the human-based interaction has to be increased. So this requires specific intervention on the part of the parents, on the part of the educational institutions that they would be enrolled to, on the part of the state in creating certain, let us say, parks or libraries or leisurely activities where children's development can take place, not necessarily through the screen time spent on the technology, but through human interaction. So this question could have been addressed fairly from our commonsensical understanding, everyday understanding. However, the structuring is of utmost importance. Bear in mind, we have to look at the aspect of socialization, number one. Child cuddling indicates the role of the family, the role of the parents in ensuring that they have a good enough development. So it is on the understanding of the child's development of various aspects. Apart from this, you can elaborate on the socio-cultural aspects of socialization. That if they're able to interact more with people belonging to different cultures, different religions, different languages, it will allow them to create a cosmopolitan attitude and identity right from the childhood onwards. So this can be quoted very briefly. However, you can also mention that the technology is not entirely a bane for the society, but it has to be limited in times of the average time that we are in aspect of the average time we are investing on it. Let us look at the next question here. This question says, does urbanization lead to more segregation and or marginalization of the poor in the Indian metropolis? This aspect directly out of one subheading of the Indian society, which is the social process called urbanization. In urbanization related topic, almost always we have observed that the impact of social processes is observed. When we are looking at a social process, first we will try to identify, define the social process, then we will look at its impact. Impact can be seen in terms of various social categories, various social groups. Here they have made the impact very specific by indicating segregation and marginalization of the poor. So impact on poor group has been particularly asked. What kind of an impact? Negative impact has been emphasized with reference to segregation and marginalization. So this is the line of argument you have to take. It is already charted out for you. Let us see what all can we write under these subheadings. First and foremost, you can indicate what is urbanization as a process. It is defined by the number of people, the population density in an area where almost 75% of people are engaged in non-agricultural activities, and it is governed by certain metropolis. So apart from that, we can mention what are the positive and the negative factors in brief. Urbanization has a lot of positive factors. If we are looking at, let us say, our economic terms, it leads to employment generation, it leads to job diversification, it could enhance skill development, it could also lead to a creation of entrepreneurial skills which are not available in the rural areas, for instance. So there is diversification, employment generation, there is more opportunities which it may create. At the same time, it also has a negative impact because it can lead to a certain kind of inequality. It can lead to urban and rural divide. It can lead to rich and poor divide, which is the specific aspect we need to emphasize on. After briefly mentioning that, you can look at what is the aspect of marginalization with respect to two social processes we will be looking at over here. One is ghettoization and the other is gentrification. Now, for those of you who are unaware of these two terms, NCERT 11th and 12th standard will be your basic bets to be able to understand the basic fundamental areas of the syllabus. What is ghettoization and gentrification? Ghetto indicates a place where the poor or the marginalized community have been under a kind of a social enclosure. They do not have access to good facilities, amenities. They have poor living condition, cramped living, which may impact their health, which may impact the longevity of their life. So ghettos are areas which are marked distinct, which are an example of marginalization, which has arisen due to the process of urbanization. On the other hand, gentrification indicates that the rich community of the society has a distinct gated community where all facilities are available, amenities are available. It is also kind of a social closure which prevents people from entering this place. So these two social processes go along in creating a divide, a social divide between the rich and the poor in the urbanized spaces. Now here you can speak about the problems associated with transportation, mobility, housing, access to services, access to facilities, amenities. These social problems can be looked into. Furthermore, you can indicate what are the way forward going from here. You can refer to the smart cities mission, the inclusive development, how there is formalization of informal work. Here also you can quote tier 2 and tier 3 cities. You may have you will recall from the previous year that they had asked the impact of the economy on certain social segments with respect to the tier 2, tier 3 cities. Here we can indicate that in the tier 1 cities, the process of urbanization has led to such increased marginalization, such increased divide between the rich and poor. So now the IT sectors are moving towards development of tier 2 and tier 3 cities where the cost of living is less, there can be better absorption. Marginalization perhaps is not going to take place here at the same extent. So this can be used as a way forward. Of course, your sustainable development goals are your best bet to incorporate as a way forward in processes aligned with urbanization. Here you can also quote the NCRB data with respect to social crime, a lack of political representation, limited access to credit facilities. These are certain generic aspects we see in terms of the push and pull factors, positive and negative implication of urbanization. So in that sense, this question is fairly straightforward. It is some question which can be addressed without much of current affairs integration or analysis of the current affairs articles. Previous year questions would also be sufficient to address this question. Let us move towards our next question here. Question says, why is caste identity in India both fluid and static? Why is caste identity both fluid and static? Here we have to look at caste in terms of the hierarchy that is inbuilt in caste. There are two hierarchies that we can look at. First, we will refer to the ritual hierarchy. Secondly, in terms of the secular hierarchy. Excuse me. The ritual hierarchy indicates that Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra have been defined in terms of their social position, which is considered to be rigid and fixated. Excuse me. In this term, it can be seen as a static hierarchy because this hierarchy is hereditary. It is based on some kind of a scripture. It is fixed and it is rigid. However, the identity of individuals along the ritual hierarchy has not remained so in the present society. Here we are looking at both the fluid identity and the static identity. Excuse me. Traditionally, we would see one's occupation as an economic character, power position, political aspect, status indication as social aspect may all be conflated and aligned according to different positions and different segments in the hierarchy. In the present time period, however, in the secular hierarchy, we see that there is mobility, there is movement that is taking place within the economic institutions, political institutions, and social positioning of individuals. So, in what aspects is the fluidity of the caste hierarchy seen? Here, we can notice that there are differences seen in economic institutions. First and foremost, let us see how fluidity has emerged in the modern society. Here, there are positive aspects and negative aspects, both are seen. How is the caste identity more fluid? It is more fluid because regardless of one's caste, they may find employment opportunities. They may find job diversification. So access to the economy would be determined by certain democratic principles, which are based on achievement orientation, which are based on meritocracy. So there is scope for certain fluidity of caste identity over here. On the other hand, before I go to the negative identity, you can also say that this indicates the fluid aspect, but the static part can also be seen in assertion of Dalit India Chamber of Commerce and Industries and Dalit middle class, which indicates that the identity of caste can be retained even though we are looking at certain changes, certain upward mobility. So the ritual identity may be retained regardless of changes in the secular identity. One may move up the economic ladder, but still they may carry forward their identity. The negative aspect that we can see over here is the idea of manual scavenging as an example, which indicates up to 90% of the Dalit population tend to be employed in manual scavenging, which shows that the rigidity of the identity, where traditionally the lower caste were assigned a sanitation based job, in the present time period also the caste identity and occupation identity have retained, which indicates that it has been static in this sense. So in economic understanding itself, we have seen the positives and the negatives, the fluid and the static. Similarly, we can also look at the political identity over here. When we are looking at political institutions, traditionally, of course, it was divided that the king would hold the power in conjunction with the Brahmin priests. They would make important decisions. The lower caste were to accept the order and be subordinate. However, the Khap Panchayats would be seen even in the present societies as a retention of the sorts, as a static identity. However, in the present time period, the caste identity has been retained. It has also been fluid. It is also static. Where is it static? Where the upper caste position or power is held intact. Where is it fluid? Where we are looking at the secular element, how changes have occurred. Here you can quote certain caste-based associations. You may have come across these terms such as Ajgar, Kham, and lately, as late as 2019, we have this idea of OPT, where we are looking at the OBCs, the Patidars and the tribes come together. If you notice, this is an entire breakthrough from the traditional ritual hierarchy, where the upper and the lower castes are actually coming together to gain power mobility, to gain a position in the society with respect to our political identity. Similarly, with caste-based politics, politicization of caste, political parties, vote bank politics, where the traditional ritual position of the caste may be retained. However, its secular implication may change according to the changes in the society. So these can be quoted over here. Furthermore, we can refer to the social changes in terms of, let us say, education, in terms of marriage, in terms of social interaction. In terms of education, we have observed how reservation is one avenue through which the traditionally lower castes are provided a scope for upward mobility. However, the argument suggests that if we are going to consider reservation as a long-term implication, we have to notice over here that it leads to rigidity and static identity of the caste system vis-a-vis, let us say, the affirmative action, vis-a-vis, let us say, the meritocratic system. Furthermore, here we can look at the intercaste marriages. Very few percentage of people have engaged in intercaste marriages. It indicates that there is very slight scope for change, which shows the static nature of the ritual hierarchy with which is associated the endogamous character of caste-based identity. The retention of the certain kind of surnames as an individual's identity also indicates a certain static nature or rigidity of the caste identity. So you can organize your answer by indicating what is the caste structure, how do we define it in terms of our ritual hierarchy and secular hierarchy. What have led to changes in the secular hierarchy? Again, a number of social processes have led to creation of new identity. Today we can see caste class continuum, caste tribe continuum, caste and gender relations. So n number of other identities have gotten subsumed with the caste system. There has been a change in the ritual hierarchy, but this is not an absolute displacement of the ritual hierarchy. Then you can use the economic, political, social aspects to indicate which are the areas in which the caste identity is fluid and which are the areas in which it is rigid. Furthermore, you can indicate, since there is a debate going on with reference to the socio-economic caste census, if you were integrating the current affairs in your analysis, you would have incorporated over here the argument for and against this survey, which the census which indicates the argument for indicates over here that it will provide a scope for a retributionist policy, for a redressal of grievances, for a scope for upward mobility. The argument against is that it will retain the caste identity, make it static, make it impossible for one's merit, for one's ability and skill set and talent to be the core reason for one to climb up the social ladder. So these are certain aspects which you can quote. Also, you can intersperse in your argument certain examples. How, let us say, lately we have observed the OBCs, particularly with reference to the Christians and the Muslims, they have been demanding for a scheduled caste status for a better representation in various aspects of the society, which indicates that the caste identity has retained, on the basis of which an individual's social standing, economic and political standing is being observed. The demand for reservation indicates that caste has not disappeared. The political will, the system's intention will indicate whether it is going to be a basis on which the society will be divided, or it can act as a parameter for upward upliftment of the marginalized section of the economy. So we can address it in this manner. Caste as a social institution, almost every year we have been observing questions. We have been observing questions with respect to change orientation within the caste system, which is what we address in our class as well. So a standard understanding of how changes are taking place, what are the examples, how current affairs can be integrated. If this is studied one time also, then it can be addressed in the upcoming exam as well. Let us look at the next question here. Discuss the impact of post-liberal economy on ethnic identity and communalism. Now, this is an interesting question. Finally, I feel like we have one question in our hand, which is slightly more analytical and not direct like the previous year question, the previous questions which we have discussed. So what is this question based on? There is intersectionality that is seen over here. We have observed that under the processes of liberalization, privatization, globalization, we study these three processes under urbanization and globalization as a social process. So post-liberal economy as a key term can be derived from our social processes, urbanization and globalization. Ethnic identity and communalism again are distinct unit. Ethnic identity we would have observed in terms of the impact of globalization on culture. Communalism is again a distinct subheading. Traditionally, we have noticed questions pertaining to communalism have been very limited, where they have merely asked about the definition, key forms of communalism, examples to illustrate. Here in this question, they are asking about the impact of economy on the society, to put it in very bare, simple terms. In specific, however, what aspect of economy are we looking at? The LPG reforms in the 1990s, they are indicating that there is a market orientation, there is less government regulation, there is expansion of sectoral services that are there, which can create more employment, which can diversify our jobs, and which can allow for upward mobility, creation of a new middle class. However, be careful here that we are referring to the term post-liberal economy, which is indicating the impact of the LPG reforms on the society. What is that particular impact with reference to particularly ethnic identity and religious identity? So very briefly, you can mention what are the factors of LPG, how do they have an impact on the economy, on the state, on the individual. You can mention aspects such as market orientation, lack of government intervention, enhancement of technology and innovation, trade, investment, information, R&D, digital infrastructure. These are all aspects which are structurally changing the society, economic structure specifically. Procedural changes can be brought about with certain processes such as urbanization, industrialization, globalization. They can be cultural changes as well as structural changes. What kind of an impact then it leads to? A generic impact it would have on all aspects of all social groups of the society, on environment for instance, not just on economy but also on polity and so on. So provide a generic overview indicating what were the LPG reforms, how did they bring about structural changes, cultural changes, what kind of an impact did they have. However, this must be concluded in a very few words because this has to be comprehensive to contextualize your argument. Now coming to the basic keywords over here, the impact specifically on the ethnic identity and communalism has been asked. So how can we address this? For ethnic identity, let us see how economic changes have an impact on ethnic identity. Now, what is ethnic over here? Ethnicity is a very loosely defined term which indicates that people living in a particular region, often belonging to a same religion, they share certain kind of cultural practices which becomes their identifier. Traditionally, in the syllabus, you would have come across the term ethnicity, ethno-nationalism, which indicates that people demand for a separation from the mainstream society. Ethnic identity over here refers to our cultural identity, refers to the regional identity. So how would economy have an impact on our ethnic identity? Here you can indicate whether the market forces, employment generation, sectoral development has an impact on different ethnic communities, and if yes, in which way. Particularly here, we can also contextualize the recent, let us say, Manipur violence that we have observed between the Nagas, Kukis and the Meiteis. Although it is a very complicated debate that we are looking at, how do we address this? It has been observed that since post-liberalization, the economic development of Manipur hasn't been up to the mark. It indicates that there is regional disparity with reference to economic development. Of course, here we are looking at a difference of the geographical, let us say the hill area, the plain area. There's a difference, there is a religious divide between the Hindus and the Christians. There is a divide in terms of where land can be brought because of belonging to a particular community, because belonging to a scheduled tribe, reserved group. This has multiple overtones, but here our identification has to be with reference to the economic changes brought about in the post-liberalized economy. Here you can indicate the kind of clashes it may lead to in certain ethnic communities where regional development has not been sufficiently catered to. Particularly, we have observed it in the tribal belts, we have seen in the middle India and the northeast India. That can be quoted as an example. Secondly, we can quote a positive impact that the post-liberal economy has with respect to Dravidian urbanization. What does this indicate? States such as Tamil Nadu, we have observed that the approach that they have taken as a part of the post-liberalized economy has brought in a multi-sectoral development, particularly with reference to agriculture. Traditionally, there were caste-based relations which would dominate the primary sector of the economy. However, Tamil Nadu's government has ensured that there is intervention, the capitalist, let us say, incorporation has been there, investment has taken place, which has led to development of agrarian capitalists, which has broken down caste-based barrier. So the Dravidian nationalist movement, which was indicating that there has to be breakaway of the caste barrier, there has to be development, there has to be social avenues, social welfare and transformation, and the status of the women has to improve. Keeping these in mind, the post-liberal development has been observed that the Dravidian urbanization is taken as a role model of development. Similarly, with Kerala model of development, the idea is to overcome the social challenges, the social transformation through economic development. The post-liberal economies have had to bear in mind that the development has to be based on multiple dimensions. Sustainable development becomes important. How do we retain the idea of environmental sustainability and development for the future generation? How do we balance infrastructural development and the identity of the ethnic groups so that there is no cultural erosion? Here, Kerala and Tamil Nadu as part of the Dravidian nationalist process have been brought to the fore with respect to their development models. Furthermore, you can also refer to what kind of development has taken place with respect to certain communities such as the Parsis, Sindhis, Chettiars. There is development of the tertiary sector with respect to the steel, consumer, aviation, trade, real estate. This indicates that the ethnic communities have been able to retain their cultural identity, and there is no scope for clash over here. So the problem of regionalism can be nipped in the bud if the economic development percolates to these regions. They may retain their cultural identity, at the same time they may aspire for their economic development. That is one aspect. Furthermore, here you can briefly quote how the tier 2, tier 3 cities are also getting developed. There is the incorporation of the IT sector, which indicates that the ethnic identity or the religious identity do not act as a barrier for socio-cultural development along with economic development. That can be mentioned. Also, your geographical indication tags can be quoted over here. Certain examples you can pick up from your everyday understanding. Coming to the idea of communalism, communalism essentially refers to how religious identity can become politicized. It can lead to a division between different religious groups, between the majority and the minority group. Communalism has been specifically understood in the context of it being a brainchild of politics. In this question, however, communalism can be seen as a term of religious identity, divide between the majority and the minority. Since economic development has to be uniform, has to be multi-sectoral, has to reach the grassroots levels as well, If it does not do so, how does it lead to exacerbating the difference between different ethnic groups, between different religious groups which are panning out all of the India's geography? Here you can indicate the Sachar committee report with reference to how the Muslims as a religion have been observed to be backward in education, in employment, and inclusive development has not taken place. So post-liberal economy's idea is not just to regulate the markets, it's not just to deregulate the markets, it's not just to expand the market space, but also to ensure that there is equitable development, to ensure that there is multi-sectoral approach, to ensure that there is sustainable development, so that these identities which are more regional in their scope, social identities, do not become exacerbated. This can be mentioned, and going forward you can refer to how there is a need for inclusive economic development. We have the idea of aspirational districts, we have the idea of MG Narega urban coming up. There are various schemes and initiatives where the divide between the rich and poor is going to be bridged. The divide between different communities, be it religious majority, minority, or ethnic community, tribal community, all of these social communities, they can be better addressed if the equitable development takes place. So sustainable development can be seen as the end goal. Furthermore, you can refer to the role of policy intervention, role of urbanization, and how it can have a positive impact in binding together unity in diversity in the Indian society. This question requires a multi-sectoral analysis. It requires intersectionality within the syllabus. So try to organize it in this manner, briefly indicate what constituted of the LPG reform, what can be seen as the post-LPG impact. Furthermore, examine the impact that it has on ethnic identity, quote certain examples. Here you can take the Northeast as an example, tribal communities as an example, trading communities as an example, spread out between the middle India and the Northeast India and even South India, positives as well as negative. Then when we look at communalism, you can notice over here the role of policy intervention, the role of the state governance, the role of NGOs, civil society, and various aspects over here have to be highlighted, inching towards or pointing towards sustainable development, because sustainable development is going to lead to unity in diversity among different social institutions. So as we have observed, these 6 questions are fairly simple. We have noticed that this year the trend was more, let us say, inching more towards fairly easier basic foundational understanding of the core ideas. It did not require too much of an analytical skill as we have observed. However, going forward, the suggestion would be to constantly read the newspaper articles because they help you contextualize. Sometimes the questions may appear to be too simple, but the rationale behind that question may be current affairs integration. So it is not just the standard textbooks. Your understanding of the Indian society needs to be a little more widespread, and it has to move beyond the classical definitions, factors and features, because that is what UPSC is also inching towards now. So I hope this analysis has been useful for you. Thank you.